Chapter 22:17. However, by the time Sun Yu caught up to him, Yu was already nowhere to be seen. He spread out his divine thought, but it was quickly dispersed. There was no choice. There was simply too much power in the formation projection. His divine thought could not extend too far. However, even so, Sun Yu did not give up. However, he soon realized that the attack that originally enveloped the void around him had rapidly disappeared. It was obvious that the other party was only targeting Yu and not him. Although there was no attack, Sun Yu did not leave. Instead, he stood on the spot with a gloomy expression. His immense divine sense spread out once again. Not long after, he saw a violent energy fluctuation in the distance. The violent energy fluctuation enveloped a large area. Although Sun Yu's divine thought could not extend inside, he was basically sure that it was the formation projection. Although Sun Yu wanted to save Yu, he did not rush in recklessly. If he rushed in like that, both of them would be killed in the formation in the end. The sacred leader said that this is the formation projection. Only by destroying the formation itself can the formation projection be destroyed. Then, where is the formation's main body? Sun Yu pondered and began to search. At the same time, he quickly sent out a few communication talismans. With his strength, even if he found the formation's main body, he would not be able to do anything to the other party. Therefore, he sent a message to the remaining 20 over Virtue Realm experts to rush over and rescue Yu together. As for the alliance, although Sun Yu knew that Yu was valued, he also wanted to ask the Wanliang Palace Master for help. However, he could not directly contact the Wanliang Palace Master. The speed of communication talismans was extremely fast. Not long after Sun Yu sent out the communication talisman, Xian and the others who were far away in the outer area of the Wanliang Palace received it. Shi Kai and the others immediately rushed over. At this moment, Sun Yu continued to search for the formation's main body. However, after a period of time, he found nothing. Then what about Yu? What was the situation in the formation? Yu knew that the other party was targeting him. Therefore, he directly released the control on Sun Yu's soul. At the same time, he quickly distanced himself from Sun Yu. Sure enough, the projection of the array formation only locked onto him and continued to attack him. Soon, Sun Yu left the immortal realm. Moreover, Yu also angrily discovered that after getting rid of Sun Yu, the attack of the array projection seemed to have weakened quite a bit. His attacks were still as sharp and terrifying as ever. However, he was unable to kill Yu with a single strike. Of course, if Yu didn't continue to resist or dodge because he thought that he wouldn't be killed in one hit, then he was gravely mistaken. If the attack of the formation projection landed on Yu, it might not be able to kill him instantly, but it could severely injure him in an instant. Yu immediately came to a realization. The other party's goal wasn't to kill him, but to injure and suppress him. Right? Perhaps, other than being jealous of him, the other party was also shocked by his battle prowess? Could it be that the other party's goal was to capture him or take over his body? Since the other party didn't want to kill him for the time being, then Yu immediately calmed down. However, even so, he didn't have the chance to escape from the shadow of the array formation. However, opportunities were created by the hands of others. He could very well create this opportunity. Otherwise, he would definitely be severely injured. At this moment, even Hichu Luoshu couldn't enter. Otherwise, he would have escaped in a Hichu Luoshu with Sun Yu. How could such a situation happen? With a thought, he immediately came up with a plan. After a long time of dodging, Yu showed signs of exhaustion. Not only did his speed slow down, even the aura that erupted from his body gradually weakened. This scene was clearly seen by the people who were controlling the main body of the formation. Haha, before long, you won't be able to hold on anymore and will become a turtle in our jar. A man laughed with a complacent look on his face. Even though his battle prowess is terrifying, he is only a heavenly human after all. How can he escape from our ambush? However, be careful, don't kill him in one go. If that's the case, all our efforts will be for naught. Another person said indifferently, "Don't worry, Moron Yu will definitely become our prisoner. If we can figure out his battle prowess, even the leader of the alliance will be ours, the third man said coldly. He. The fourth man only chuckled and didn't say anything. The four of them were the ones who were controlling the array formation and attacking Moron Yu from a distance. At this moment, they were extremely far away from the primordial star that Moron Yu was on. There were even a few primordial stars between them. Therefore, with Sun Yu's ability and reaction speed, he wouldn't be able to find them in a short period of time. Perhaps, by the time Sun Yu found the four of them, Moron Yu would have already been captured. Bang! Moron Yu's body became more and more stagnant. If he wasn't careful, he would be hit by a force. After a dull thud, Moron Yu spat out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, Moron Yu was like a kite with a broken string as he was sent flying. Bang! 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 Just as he was sent flying, another dozen or so bursts of energy slammed into his body. His physical body was almost blown to smithereens. In the end, Moron Yu fell to the ground and stopped moving. From afar, Moron Yu's face was pale, and he seemed to be breathing in but not out. He was not far from death. In the distance, when the four people controlling the array formation saw Moron Yu unconscious on the ground, they were pleasantly surprised. Then, they took a step forward at the same time. In a flash, they appeared near Moron Yu. Moron Yu, who was unconscious, was shocked. He didn't expect the array formation to have the ability to teleport. These people were directly teleported to his side, but the array formation projection was still there and directly enveloped him. This made Moron Yu, who was pretending to be unconscious, feel very helpless. That's right, the reason why he was unconscious was completely because he was pretending. This was part of his plan. He imagined that as long as he fainted, the array formation projection would stop. That was because the people controlling the array formation would come and capture him. However, nothing was absolute in the world. Moron Yu had miscalculated. Moreover, Moron Yu also discovered that the four people who came over were all at the Tao Lord realm. In fact, two of them were even at a higher realm than Sun Yu. With their strength, they could have taken action personally. That way, Moron Yu and Sun Yu wouldn't have been able to fight back. Why did they still use the array formation projection? In the beginning, Moron Yu couldn't figure it out. But after a moment, he realized what was going on. Wasn't he valued by the palace master of the Wanliang Palace? Moreover, there was one person who stayed behind. These people were probably worried that the palace master of the Wanliang Palace had left some means on Moron Yu, such as a spiritual will incarnation or something. Unfortunately, the palace master of the Wanliang Palace only gave Moron Yu a Tao artifact and didn't have any protective means. Otherwise, he could have charged out under the attack of the array formation projection. We finally got him. A Tao Lord expert looked at Moron Yu, his eyes shining like a hungry wolf. Hurry up and get him away. If we alarm others with such a big commotion, I don't want to cause trouble, another person said in a deep voice. Immediately after, one of them stretched out a large hand and grabbed Moron Yu, who was pretending to be unconscious on the ground. What should I do? If I escape now, I definitely won't be able to escape, so I can only be captured by them? Moron Yu felt helpless. He didn't want to become someone's prisoner. Otherwise, the consequences would be unpredictable. In fact, if he resisted now, he would probably be captured by the four Tao Lords. Moreover, he couldn't stand physical pain. In that case, could he only watch as he was captured by them? In the end, Moron Yu decided not to resist. Thus, he was stuffed into a spatial treasure by one of the powerhouses. Haha, Moron Yu can't escape from the yin-yang cauldron even if he has the strength of a Tao Lord. Moreover, even if I have it in my hands, even a Tao Lord expert won't know that he's in my hands. Moron Yu heard the Tao Lord expert's smug expression. Then, another person urged everyone to leave. Inside the yin-yang cauldron, Moron Yu didn't know what was going on outside. The four of them activated the teleportation ability of the array formation projection again and teleported back to the array formation's main body. Then, they put away the array formation's main body and left. At this moment, Sun Yu still hadn't discovered the array formation's main body. However, after the array formation was put away, Sun Yu couldn't sense the existence of the array formation projection. In other words, Murong Yu's current situation boded ill rather than well. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, a group of people tore through the void and shot over from the distant horizon. Soon, they appeared beside Sun Yu. Looking at Sun Yu's ashen face, Murong Xian and the others immediately had a bad feeling. Chi Kai shouted in a deep voice, "Sun Yu, where's the Holy Lord? Why aren't you going to save the Holy Lord? Why are you standing here in a daze?" The Holy Lord. Sun Yu's face was ashen as he told them about the array formation projection. Immediately, the crowd became anxious, and they all looked murderous. Calm down. Father's soul jade slip hasn't shattered. In other words, his life isn't in danger yet. Let's search first. No matter who it is, if I find out, I'll kill them without mercy, Murong Xian said with a cold expression. As a result, the group split up. However, those people had already left. Furthermore, they weren't Murong Yu, who could follow their life auras and track them down. Therefore, they didn't find anything at all. Everyone gathered again and looked at each other. I think we should ask the Wanliang Palace's palace master for help. Perhaps only he can save the Holy Lord. An idea flashed in Sun Yu's mind, and he roughly explained that Murong Yu was valued. Chapter 22:18. What? There's actually such a thing? When Murong Xian and the others painstakingly found the palace master of the Wanliang Palace, many days had passed. There was no other way. Murong Xian and the others were weak, so it was impossible for them to meet the palace master of the Wanliang Palace easily. However, after the Wanliang Palace learned of this matter, he was furious. After all, he had just decided to focus on nurturing Murong Yu, and Murong Yu had just decided to be loyal to him. But in the blink of an eye, this happened. Wasn't it obvious that they wanted to make things difficult for him? Don't worry. I will definitely find out about this matter as soon as possible. If they dare to touch Murong Yu, they are going against me. If I find out, I will kill them without mercy. The palace master of the Wanliang Palace said with a murderous aura. At the same time, he had already instructed a deputy palace master to take charge of this matter. The palace master of the Wanliang Palace is furious. He has already done his best to investigate this matter. With his ability, he should be able to save father. After leaving the hall, Murong Xian pretended to be calm and said. The others nodded slightly, but they couldn't really relax. Although Murong Yu's soul jade slip didn't shatter, they couldn't relax until they saw that Murong Yu was out of danger. Let's try our best to investigate, Murong Xian said and strode out of the Wanliang Palace. The others also followed and began to investigate. This was a space with a radius of about 100 miles. It was so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers. This was the internal space of the yin-yang cauldron. With the power of a Tao artifact of this level, the space inside was only so big. It was really too small. However, Murong Yu, who was in the yin-yang cauldron, didn't have time to despise the expert who owned this Tao artifact. Because in this space, there was an inexplicable force suppressing him at all times. He couldn't enter the Hichu Luo Shu, and he couldn't even take out any origin tools or magic treasures. This was probably one of the abilities of the yin-yang cauldron. In addition, Murong Yu had also tried to directly leave the yin-yang cauldron. However, he couldn't do so. In other words, Murong Yu was currently unable to leave the yin-yang cauldron. Unless the yin-yang cauldron was open from the outside, Murong Yu would be able to leave through the exit. However, the reason for opening the exit now was that the 4 people were going to attack Murong Yu. He had no chance to escape from the yin-yang cauldron. This made Murong Yu grit his teeth. He was really unlucky. Whoosh! All of a sudden, a glaring light burst out in the pitch-black darkness. Because of the sudden appearance of the light, Murong Yu couldn't help but squint his eyes. At the same time, an extremely strong and dangerous aura enveloped his heart. Even Murong Yu's soul began to tremble. A life-threatening crisis. Murong Yu turned pale with fright and looked in the direction of the light. He saw that the sky in the distance had been drowned by a large expanse of flames. The glaring light came from those flames. The flames had already filled half of the entire treasure space. Furthermore, they were surging over in a ferocious manner, wanting to drown Murong Yu. Murong Yu's soul continued to tremble. The danger was getting more and more intense. He knew that if he was drowned by those flames, he would most likely be burned to death. At the same time, an even stronger sense of danger swept over from behind. Murong Yu turned around and saw that it was pitch black in front of him. He still couldn't see his fingers. The flames behind him seemed to be unable to light up the eternal darkness. What's going on? Murong Yu was puzzled. However, his face was soon filled with astonishment. This was because he realized that the eternal darkness behind him wasn't darkness at all. It was clearly a flame that presented darkness. Yin-yang cauldron, yin-yang fire. The light was the yang fire, while the eternal darkness was the yin fire. One yin and one yang filled both sides of the yin-yang cauldron. Moreover, it didn't seem to be just filling both sides. It was slowly sweeping towards the middle. Was this the rhythm of a fight, or was it going to merge? Murong Yu's face suddenly became solemn. If it was only the yin fire and the yang fire, it would be a fatal threat to Murong Yu. If the two flames were to fight or fuse, wouldn't it become even more terrifying? Would it refine Murong Yu? However, although Murong Yu's face was solemn, he wasn't afraid. At most, his physical body would be destroyed. His main soul was still in the Hichu Luo Shu. Although the yin-yang fire was terrifying, it definitely couldn't refine the world's #1 book, the Hichu Luo Shu. Murong Yu had absolute confidence. However, if his physical body was refined, he wouldn't be qualified to become the Chaos Controller. After all, only the chaotic celestial body was qualified to become the Chaos Controller. Therefore, Murong Yu wouldn't just stand by and watch as his body was refined. He wanted to fight, but now he had nowhere to go. Other than the centermost position where he was at, the other places were already filled with yin fire and yang fire. Every corner was filled. Whoosh! Murong Yu simply sat cross-legged on the spot and entered a defensive posture. He circulated the power in his body to the extreme, and his physical body was also activated to the extreme. At the same time, the millions of roots of the tree of life in his dantian that were rooted in the endless void trembled rapidly, frantically devouring the free, chaotic energy. Then, the tree of life transformed it into the power of life and crazily washed over his body. Fortunately, the yin-yang cauldron couldn't restrict the tree of life's extraction of chaotic energy. Otherwise, Murong Yu could only rely on his own strength and physical body to resist the yin-yang fire. The yin-yang fire was extremely fast. Just as Murong Yu sat cross-legged, it had already annihilated Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu was closer to the yang fire, so was the yang fire that engulfed him first. Instantly, a wave of blazing heat drowned Murong Yu. At this moment, Murong Yu clearly saw his physical body begin to melt. Yes, it was like metal melting under high temperature. Murong Yu's powerful physical body and strength were of no use at all. Even the power of life had no place to be used. The power of life was the most powerful force for healing. However, it was only used for healing. For example, Murong Yu's physical body had been melted, and there were no wounds at all. It was directly fused. How could the power of life heal? At the same time, Murong Yu's physical body was also pushed forward by the yang fire. After a while, the yin fire followed the yang fire and instantly drowned him. Whoosh! A wave of coldness that seemed to freeze even the soul instantly drowned Murong Yu. At this moment, Murong Yu saw that his physical body, even the meridians and strength in his body were frozen. Yin and yang, the two extremes. In an instant, Murong Yu entered the realm of ice and fire, and he felt like dying. However, although the yin fire was also very dangerous, it stopped Murong Yu's physical body from melting. In a way, this ensured that Murong Yu would not be melted by the yang fire. Fortunately, although the yin fire froze Murong Yu's physical body, meridians, and strength, however, it did not freeze his mind. Therefore, Murong Yu could still control his mind. An incomparably violent power of life surged out from his dantian and instantly covered his entire physical body, quickly repairing the melted physical body. What made Moronyu a little relieved was that the Een fire could not freeze the power of life. Could it be that the power of life was of a much higher level than the Een fire? Could it be that these existences of heaven and earth were also afraid of existences of a higher level than themselves? However, this was a good thing. At least, if the Een fire maintained its current state, Moronyu still had the confidence to save his life. However, Moronyu's thinking was too idealistic. It seemed that they did not agree with each other, but it also seemed that it was angry that it could not destroy Moronyu's physical body. After pausing for a few breaths, the Een fire began to move. Boom, boom, boom. Waves of Een fire surged from afar like raging waves, violently bombarding Moronyu's body. As a result, Moronyu continued to enjoy the combination of fire and ice. One moment, the Yang fire had the upper hand, and Moronyu's physical body was melted by a lot. The next moment, the Een fire had the upper hand, freezing Moronyu's physical body and strength. Moronyu complained in his heart. Only when the Een fire confronted each other could he use the power of life to temper his physical body and repair his damaged physical body. However, before he could completely repair his physical body, the Een fire attacked again. The repeated attacks almost made Moronyu collapse. However, not long after, Moronyu also found something that surprised him. Under the tempering of the Een fire, his physical body and strength were tempered, becoming more solid and powerful. If this went on, Moronyu would break through the realm and reach the true self-realm. Moreover, this breakthrough would not have any side effects on him. It was because his strength and physical body were tempered to the extreme that he could break through. This kind of breakthrough was the dream of all cultivators, because this kind of foundation would be very stable. However, it was impossible for Moronyu to break through easily. However, he still gritted his teeth and persevered. Just like that, many days passed in a row. While gritting his teeth and persevering, Moronyu felt a little strange. The four people who kidnapped him did not seem to have made any sound. Their purpose was not to read his memories and even take over his body. Why did they not do anything for so many days? However, this was a good thing for him. It was best to wait until he broke through before they made a move. That way, Moronyu would have the ability to fight back. In fact, what Moronyu did not know was that it was not that the four people did not want to make a move on Moronyu. However, they did not have the time. At this moment, they were busy running for their lives. The strength of the Infinite Palace was very terrifying. After learning that Moronyu had been kidnapped, they had already found the four people on the second day. Therefore, the Infinite Palace directly launched a life-threatening pursuit. How could these four people be a match for the Infinite Palace? Therefore, after receiving the news, they began to frantically run for their lives. Chapter 22:19. It was exactly because of this that they hadn't been able to make a move against Moronyu even though they captured Moronyu. It was even to the extent that the yin-yang flames within the yin-yang cauldron hadn't appeared because of them, and it had appeared on its own. What Moronyu didn't know was that the Infinite Palace had dispatched Downlord-level existences to pursue the four of them. The Infinite Palace, Murong, Xian, and the others had extremely gloomy expressions on their faces as they gathered together. It has already been a month. There's still no news of the Hallowed Lord. We can't even send him a message, said Zhang Ao in a low voice. Chi Kai and the others shook their heads repeatedly. It wasn't just a message. They were Morongyu's slaves, and they were usually able to directly communicate with Morongyu through their souls. Yet now, they were utterly unable to contact Morongyu. It was like the space where Morongyu resided had their connection forcefully severed by a formidable force. However, they were slightly gratified because Morongyu's soul jade slip hadn't shattered at all. On the other hand, Chi Kai and the others whose souls had been controlled by Morong, you were still able to sense Morongyu's existence, even though they were unable to contact him. It was because of these existences that they felt slightly at ease. However, they wouldn't be able to feel at ease so long as Murong Yu didn't appear before them. I heard that the Infinite Palace has dispatched Downlord-level experts to pursue the four of them. However, their strengths are extremely terrifying, and they haven't been captured even after an entire month has passed. Murong spoke with an unsightly expression. That isn't all. Supposedly, the Downlord of the Infinite Palace even suffered an ambush from the four of them and was almost killed. In the end, he was heavily injured and fled. Besides that, a few Downlords of the Infinite Palace were even killed. Supposedly, the Palace Master of the Infinite Palace was furious because of this incident, and he's dispatched Vice Palace Masters to pursue the four of them. Duan Muqing spoke of the latest information he'd obtained. Everyone's expressions changed when they heard this. Even a Downlord had been heavily injured. So exactly how terrifying were their strengths? Now that Murong Yu had fallen into their hands, the odds were against him. Don't be too worried. According to my knowledge, the Vice Palace Masters of the Infinite Palace are at least at the third level of the Downlord level. The Hallowed Lord should be fine since they've made a move. Son, you consoled them. However, he himself didn't believe what he was saying. Everyone looked at each other. Although they were very worried, there was nothing they could do. So, what was the situation was Murong Yu's current. He's is to himself's. However, Murong Yu's to be to Tuz's. Hats S had to changes the his to yang, S to his to us. He's to T to S to Murong Yang. From afar, Murong Yu, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground and receiving the baptism of the yin-yang flames, looked like a transcendent being. Yu-yang-yang-yang-yang-yang. Murong Yu was roughly aware that such a change had occurred to him because it came from his soul. At this moment, his main soul was seated cross-legged on the spot within his soul space. Wasn't his main soul in the Hichu Luoshu? Why has it appeared in my soul space? Didn't they say that I can't utilize all sorts of treasures? Could it be that I can take something out of the Hichu Luoshu? Actually, that was impossible. Even until now, Murong Yu was still unable to figure out why his soul had appeared in his soul space. It had to be explained from half a month ago. Half a month ago, Murong Yu was doing his best to resist the yin and yang flames. As he gritted his teeth and used his life force to recover, his strength and physical body improved by leaps and bounds. If this continued, then his cultivation and body would be able to break through to the true self realm. However, for some unknown reason, his main soul had suddenly left the Hichu Luoshu on this day and returned to his soul space. This had given Murong Yu a huge fright. After all, his main soul had appeared. If his physical body and main soul were destroyed, then he would really be dead. If his main soul was in the Hichu Luoshu, even if his physical body was destroyed, he wouldn't really die. However, he couldn't let his main soul return to the Hichu Luoshu now. Moreover, Murong Yu had discovered a strange phenomenon. After his main soul had appeared, it had begun to cultivate. He even saw traces of the yin and yang flames being swallowed by it. The soul was actually swallowing the yin and yang flames on its own accord. Murong Yu was a little surprised. This was the first time his soul had swallowed any other power apart from the power of the soul. Although the yin and yang flames were flames, its essence was also power. It was just a manifestation of power. After swallowing the yin and yang flames, Murong Yu saw that his main soul was rapidly growing stronger. Murong Yu was happy to see his soul grow stronger. However, the current situation didn't seem too good. Therefore, he could only tremble in fear and fight against the yin and yang flames even more carefully. After a few days, he discovered that the speed of his soul's growth was even faster than when he had swallowed Elder Han Yi's soul. Moreover, after his observation, this had nothing to do with the yin and yang flames. Although swallowing the yin and yang flames could strengthen his soul, the strengthening was limited. It wasn't even 1%. Then, how did his soul's level increase? In the beginning, Murong Yu couldn't figure out. Later, he finally discovered that there was a huge connection between his soul's growth and his current situation. The yang flames had melted Murong Yu's physical body, but the yin flames had frozen his physical body and power. One moment he was melted, the next moment he was frozen. How did it feel to have ice and fire at the same time? Murong Yu couldn't describe it. However, the feeling was extremely uncomfortable. Although he had a strong heart, he couldn't help but moan sometimes. Sometimes, he even wanted to give up and be done with it. Once this negative attitude appeared, Murong Yu discovered that his soul's growth would stop. He couldn't improve anymore. However, when Murong Yu gritted his teeth and resisted, telling himself that he had to resist no matter what, his soul's growth speed would increase. What was going on? Murong Yu concluded. Perhaps this was the sublimation of his soul. With a tenacious personality, he wouldn't give up halfway. No matter how difficult the path ahead was, he would always face it head-on. If he could persevere with such a mentality, Murong Yu's soul would be sublimated. After his soul was sublimated, his realm would gradually increase. The effect was even better than directly devouring soul power. So, the soul can be cultivated like this. The soul race doesn't know this cultivation method at all. After discovering this, Murong Yu was very excited. All along, the improvement of his soul's realm had been the most difficult. However, after discovering that his soul could be cultivated like this, Murong Yu discovered a shortcut to cultivating his soul. He believed that as long as he continued cultivating like this in the future, his cultivation speed would become even faster. Buzz. Suddenly, Murong Yu's soul trembled violently. Murong Yu's face immediately revealed a smile. It was also at this moment that a powerful and vast aura suddenly emanated from Murong Yu's soul, instantly engulfing the entire soul space. At the same time, a purple light suddenly erupted and mixed with the powerful aura, filling the entire soul space. Murong Yu's heart was trembling with fear, but he quickly calmed down. This was because he discovered that although this aura was 100 times stronger than before, it didn't seep out of the soul space. Otherwise, if it escaped into the yin-yang cauldron, or even out of the cauldron, it would be discovered by the four people. At that time, Murong Yu's outcome will be tragic. His soul cultivation and physical body had broken through to the true self realm. At the same time, rumble. In Murong Yu's soul space, soul spheres appeared out of thin air. At first, they were like small black dots, but they rapidly expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was unknown where this soul power came from. 1, 2, 3. Murong Yu glanced and discovered that 100 soul spheres had appeared out of thin air. Moreover, soul spheres continued to appear as if 100 of them wasn't the end, but just the beginning. 100, 200, 300. In the end, no more soul spheres appeared. After a quick calculation, Murong Yu now had 3,000 soul orbs in his possession, including the ones he already had. Looking at the 3,000 identical soul spheres, Murong Yu was somewhat dumbfounded. First there were 36, and now there are 3,000 soul spheres. Is there a special relationship? What was worth mentioning was that before this breakthrough, his soul orbs had already reached 36. 108,000 worlds of cultivation, 3,000 worlds of immortals, and 36 worlds of gods. Now it seems that the tables have turned? Will the next step be to condense 108,000 soul spheres? What's the special meaning of these numbers? Murong Yu was puzzled. His soul space was now extremely vast. 3,000 soul spheres were distributed around his primordial soul, just like a small galaxy. Galaxy, then star field. Then, would the soul space form a star field, or even a universe? Would it form multiple universes in the end, like the endless chaos? These unrealistic thoughts appeared in Murong Yu's mind. In fact, the endless chaos was formed like this. Planets and star fields formed a galaxy, and countless galaxies formed a star field. Multiple star fields formed a universe, and the many universes and even more chaos formed a complete chaos. Perhaps this is the only way to become the master of chaos? Evolving into the endless chaos, and finally combining with the endless chaos to become the master of chaos? Only then can one control the entire chaos. What Moronyu didn't know was that these thoughts that suddenly appeared in his mind weren't unrealistic. He had touched upon it again, and truly touched upon the method to become the master of chaos. Or was it the true meaning? Only by combining, only by unifying could one control it. Chapter 22:20. His soul broke through first and reached the true self realm. For a moment, Morongyu's soul power skyrocketed. Moreover, as long as this continued, his soul realm would continue to improve. It was the same for his physical body and cultivation. However, he didn't know how long the situation would last. Because he didn't know what was going on outside, Moronyu didn't know how long this situation would last. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and endured the baptism of the yin-yang fire without any distractions. If he wanted to gain freedom, he needed to be more powerful. If the true self realm wasn't enough, then he would break through to the selfless realm, or even the initial Tao realm. If so, how could those people still be his match? Time passed slowly. Under the baptism of the yin-yang fire, Morongyu's physical body and cultivation slowly improved. Because of Morongyu's tenacity, his soul continued to improve. His cultivation base continued to rise. It seemed like he was going to break through to the second level of the true self realm. Finally, after a few days, Morongyu's physical body made a breakthrough after his soul and reached the true self realm. Now, only his cultivation hadn't broken through yet. Once his cultivation broke through to the true self realm, Morongyu's combat power would definitely reach the Tao Lord realm. At that time, it wouldn't be a problem for him to kill a Tao Lord realm expert with his bare hands. Boom! Finally, Morongyu's cultivation broke through and successfully reached the true self realm. His soul, cultivation, and physical body all reached the true self realm at the same time. The moment his cultivation broke through, an extremely powerful aura burst out from Morongyu's body and instantly filled the entire yin-yang cauldron. Even the yin-yang fire that was baptizing Morongyu's body was forced back by this terrifying power. It couldn't hurt Morongyu in a short time. At the same time, in the outside world, the expressions of the four Tao Lords changed slightly, especially the Tao Lord with the yin-yang cauldron. He was even more shocked. Oh no! The yin-yang fire in the yin-yang cauldron erupted again. Please don't burn Morongyu to death. Otherwise, all our efforts will be in vain. Then why don't you hurry up and see if Morongyu is okay? The other one immediately shouted. They had gone through untold hardships to capture Morongyu, and now they were still being hunted down by the Infinite Palace, which made them both physically and mentally exhausted. If Morongyu was also burned to death, they would have gone for wool and come home shorn. Not only would they not be able to eat mutton, but they would also be in trouble. Boom! Just as that person was about to extend his spiritual sense into the yin-yang cauldron to check on Morongyu's situation, a huge hand smashed through the void and locked onto the four of them. The faces of the four changed dramatically. As for the Tao Lord expert who had wanted to check on Morongyu, he didn't continue. Instead, he instantly unleashed his strongest attack, joining forces with the four of them to attack the incoming giant hand. The reason was none other than the people chasing after them outside were experts from the Infinite Palace. Most importantly, he was stronger than the four of them. Although they successfully blocked the other party's giant hand, the four of them couldn't help but spit out blood. The disparity in strength was too great. They were no match for him at all. However, fortunately, the four of them were still fast, so they could still maintain the advantage for the time being. However, if this continued, they would definitely be killed. Surrender without a fight. Otherwise, although the universe is vast, there will definitely be no place for you to stand. Even if you are chased into the endless chaos, you won't be able to escape the Infinite Palace's pursuit. The expert from the Infinite Palace said with a cold expression and murderous intent. The four of them ignored him and continued to flee quickly. Inside the yin-yang cauldron, Morongyu was smiling at this moment. It was as if he didn't care that he was trapped in the yin-yang cauldron and suffered the torture of ice and fire at the same time. In fact, this pain was nothing to an increase in strength. After all, Murong Yu had endured pain billions of times more intense than this. He knew very well that if he wanted to become a master of chaos, he had to pay more than others. He had to endure things that others couldn't endure or do. Pain and torture were just stepping stones on the path of cultivation. With every step he took, he would more or less encounter these pains and torments. Only by defeating them would he be able to achieve greater things. Perhaps it was this mentality that allowed Murong Yu's soul to be sublimated. His cultivation speed skyrocketed. At this moment, the three of them had reached the true self realm. Murong Yu's combat strength skyrocketed again. True self, what was true self? True self was returning to one's true self, returning to one's natural state. Therefore, the current Murong Yu didn't seem to be showing off his abilities. From afar, he looked like an ordinary young mortal who couldn't be any more ordinary. Of course, this was only on the surface. At this moment, Murong Yu vaguely exuded a noble and otherworldly aura. In fact, there was even a faint purple light in the depths of his eyes occasionally. It suppressed the souls of all living beings in the universe. This was one of the characteristics of the chaotic race. Endure what others can't. Only when my heart is strong can I be truly powerful. Murong Yu was still sitting cross-legged on the spot. When he was baptized by the yin-yang fire, his soul had been sublimated. This not only allowed him to truly come into contact with the method or the true essence of becoming a chaos controller. Moreover, it allowed him to see himself clearly. True self? True self was to see his own heart clearly. All Dharma treasures, essence artifacts, natural treasures, and so on were just external appearances. Only when one's heart was strong could they be truly powerful. What was the heart? The heart was one's own thoughts and thoughts. Only when one's heart was strong could one endure what others couldn't. Only then could one's soul, cultivation, and physical body continuously improve. The true self-realm was actually to see one's heart clearly and cultivate it. Crack, crack. Murong Yu clenched his fist lightly, and the void around his fist exploded. Even the yin-yang fire could only be destroyed. My strength is definitely at least 10,000 times stronger than before I broke through. The current me is confident that I can easily crush low-level Dao Lords. A satisfied smile appeared on Murong Yu's face. Low-level Dao Lords were level 1 to level 3 Dao Lords. Murong Yu's combat strength was actually so terrifying now. What if he used treasures like the Chaos Blade? Wouldn't he be able to kill or even crush mid-level Dao Lords? They hadn't fought yet, so Murong Yu didn't compare. However, he was completely capable of protecting himself against mid-level Dao Lords. Cultivation and physical body aside, the sublimation of my soul this time is the most terrifying. With 3,000 soul spheres, I could devour a lot of soul energy from the endless chaos with almost every breath. Murong Yu muttered to himself as he felt the power of the 3,000 soul spheres. Right now, my spiritual force is like a true fountain. It's endless, and there's no fear of it ever drying up. However, the more soul spheres there were, the more soul energy he needed. Naturally, it was even more difficult to break through. However, as long as Murong Yu remained true to himself, his soul would continue to sublimate and become stronger. Murong Yu was no longer worried about this. If we're talking about the amount of soul energy, then even experts like Forefather Han Yi are far inferior to me. However, be it in terms of quality or other aspects, I'm far inferior to Patriarch Han Yi. Therefore, although my soul's lethality isn't bad, it's still far from Patriarch Han Yi's. However, if I can break through to the selfless realm, I'll probably be comparable to Patriarch Han Yi. Murong Yu thought to himself as he sized up the yin-yang cauldron. After entering the yin-yang cauldron, he was burned by the yin-yang fire. He could only resist it and didn't have time to size up this space. It wasn't big, only about 50 kilometers in radius. Murong Yu observed for a moment. This yin-yang cauldron was different from the yin-yang cauldron. It was divided into two parts, yin and yang. Swish, when Muron Yu was studying how the yin-yang fire appeared, the yin-yang fire vanished into thin air. Muron Yu was not surprised, because previously, these yin-yang fires appeared suddenly. Suddenly appearing, then suddenly disappearing. Wasn't it very normal? Except, these yin-yang fires were fundamentally different from the yin-yang fires spewed out from the yin-yang cauldron. The power inside the yin-yang cauldron was unable to let him cultivate or even advance his realm, because the yin-yang cauldron's level was the same as his. How powerful Muron Yu's strength was, the power that erupted from the yin-yang cauldron was that much stronger. This kind of power that was on par with Muron Yu's realm was basically useless to Muron Yu. Bang! 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 Right at this time, Muron Yu suddenly heard that someone seemed to be opening the yin-yang cauldron. Without saying a word, Muron Yu directly fainted. It was even to the extent that his physical body even became a bloody mess, with patches of green and red. Some places were melted, but some places were frozen, like 10,000-year-old ice. This reaction speed, this acting skill, could simply become an award-winning actor. Whoosh! Just after Muron Yu completed his disguise, he felt that he had been led out of the yin-yang cauldron. He was finally out. Muron Yu was a little excited, and, at the same time, he secretly sized up the outside. At this time, they seemed to be deep underground, because he smelled the fragrance of the soil. He also saw the cave that had just been dug out around them. There were 4 of them, and not one of them was missing. However, what made Muron Yu's killing intent soar was that these 4 people were now in a very sorry state. All of them were covered in blood. Most importantly, the 4 of them seemed to be seriously injured. Seriously injured? Then their strength would naturally be greatly reduced. This was definitely Muron Yu's opportunity. These people had no enmity with him, but they ambushed him and almost killed him in the end. This hatred was simply a blood feud, and they could not live under the same sky. However, he did not immediately make a move. Who knew if these people were really seriously injured? What if they were all acting experts like him? After all, Muron Yu did not know that the 4 of them were being hunted down by the Wanliang Palace. Chapter 22-21. However, Muron Yu soon discovered that these people were not as good at acting as him. They were seriously injured. This was especially true for the 2 weaker Dao Lords. They were heavily injured, and they were probably only able to unleash less than 50% of their peak strength. With Muron Yu's current strength, if he went berserk and killed, the 2 of them would probably be killed before they could react. Even if they died, they wouldn't know how they died and who killed them. Of course, with Muron Yu's current combat strength, it was enough to crush low-level Dao Lords. Even if the 2 weaker disciples were not seriously injured, they were not Muron Yu's match at all. What Muron Yu was wary of were the other 2 Dao Lords. Both of them were stronger than Sun Yu, who was a 5th-order Dao Lord. One of them was not much stronger, only a small realm. However, the other person was definitely an 8th-order Dao Lord, or even a 9th-order Dao Lord. His strength was extremely terrifying. However, the 2 of them were not having a good time either. All of them were seriously injured. This surprised Muron Yu, who had the strength to severely injure the 4 of them. That was a 9th-order Dao Lord, F** King Infinite Palace, to actually chase us for more than a month. The 2nd-order Dao Lord cursed loudly. It seemed like he wanted to vent the anger and resentment in his heart through this method. It turned out that they were being chased by the Infinite Palace. Muron Yu finally understood why they were in such a sorry state and were seriously injured. However, he was soon shocked. These people managed to preserve their lives under the pursuit of the Infinite Palace's experts and even escaped. How powerful were their methods? Fortunately, the 4 of them were seriously injured now, giving Muron Yu a chance to escape. Otherwise, he would not have been able to escape at all. If we can learn his secrets from this kid, once we become much more powerful, I'll charge into the Palace of Infinite and kill all of those bastards there. The other Dao Lord was filled with a murderous aura as he spoke. The 6th-order Dao Lord smiled coldly. Why wait until your strength increases greatly? This time, the infinite palace is actually chasing us. This enmity was absolutely irreconcilable. I suggest that after we recover our strength, we use the great four symbols formation to flatten the infinite palace. Doesn't the infinite palace have downlords? Let's see if they can withstand the attacks of our four symbols grand formation and the projection of the formation. Even if it was unable to annihilate their downlord, it was more than enough to annihilate the other disciples of the infinite palace. I'll let them know the consequences of offending our four symbols sect. It turned out that the array formation projection was called the four symbols great array. These people are the ancestors of the four symbols sect? As Muronyu pondered this, he didn't appear too shocked by the Daylord's thoughts. He had seen too many cases of families being exterminated for no reason. Moreover, although the four symbols great formation was terrifying, the Palace of Infinite definitely had a mountain guarding formation. Could the projection of the four symbols great formation attack the Palace of Infinite through the mountain guarding formation? Moreover, if the Downlord of the Wanliang Palace were to make a move, the grand formation of four symbols would probably not be able to do anything to them, right? Let's not talk about this for now. Let me read this kid's memories first. The rest of you should come as well. Otherwise, if he dies, we'll be wasting our energy. The Downlord frowned slightly and then said, Murongyu's heart skipped a beat. How could his memories be read? Perhaps he could only take the risk and attack now. The other three Downlords nodded slightly and were about to read Murongyu's attack. However, right at that moment, Soul Storm, Murongyu roared in his heart and directly unleashed his strongest soul attack. However, the 3,000 soul balls in Murongyu's soul space began to spin rapidly, emitting waves of soul power. In the end, they broke through Murongyu's soul space and strangled the four Downlords like raging waves. In fact, a dazzling purple light that was mixed with the soul power swept out. This was only the first step of Murongyu's counterattack. At the same time as the soul attack, he had already taken out the Chaos Blade. Unlike the soul attack, the Chaos Blade was only targeted at the Downlord. Only by forcing him back would he be able to escape their control. Pooh! Pooh! The two low-level Downlords were no match for Murongyu to begin with. Now that they were heavily injured, they couldn't even use half of their strength. Therefore, they didn't even have time to react before their souls were ground to dust. Even in death, they still had a look of pleasant surprise on their faces. Their expressions were still frozen at the moment when they were about to read Murongyu's memories. You're courting death. The Downlord of rank 6 and rank 9 were able to react in time. Instantly, they both roared angrily and punched out at the same time, fiercely attacking Murongyu. They wanted to blow Murongyu up with a single punch. However, at this moment, the dazzling purple light exploded violently. It was as if two primordial great emperors were attacking the two of them. The Downlord of rank 6 was already heavily injured and his strength was greatly reduced. Therefore, the moment he came into contact with the purple light, his soul was suppressed. He couldn't move. If this were to continue, his soul would be blasted into smithereens by the soul attack that would soon follow. Right at this moment, the 9th-ranked Downlord let out an explosive roar. Boom! Instantly, the Downlord of rank 6 came to his senses. However, Murongyu's soul storm had already arrived. A look of fear appeared on the Downlord's face. He instantly mustered all his strength and attacked with all his might. Boom! After an earth-shattering explosion, his entire body was sent flying. At the same time, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He was too heavily injured, and his combat strength was greatly reduced. Most importantly, the current Murongyu was no longer the same person. His combat strength was no longer the same. Even when he was a peak rank 6 Downlord, Murongyu still had the strength to fight. 9 words mantra, 9 words as one. Seeing that he couldn't kill the Downlord of rank 6 with one attack, Murongyu hastily used the 9 words mantra. An illusory primordial emperor instantly tore through the void and stepped out from the primordial era. His body emitted a terrifying aura that caused one's soul to tremble. Morong Yu and the other two couldn't see the Emperor's appearance clearly at all. They only saw the Emperor step through the void. After appearing in the space-time they were in, he sent a palm strike towards the rank 6 Daolord from afar. The rank 6 Daolord's face was filled with fear, as though he had seen an extremely terrifying scene. He mustered all his strength and blasted out a double dragon pearl, wanting to block the Great Emperor's attack. However, Morong Yu, the rank 9 Daolord, and even the rank 6 Daolord himself knew that there was no way he could block this attack. With a poof, the Daolord was directly annihilated. Not even his powder was left behind. After killing him, the primordial emperor disappeared into thin air, as though he had never appeared. What's going on? Morong Yu and the rank 9 Daolord were shocked. That's right, even Morong Yu himself was shocked. Although he had used the 9 words mantra at the same time previously, it didn't seem to have such great power back then. Back in the cultivation world, Morong Yu knew that once he gathered the 9 words mantra, he would be invincible. However, even though he had gathered the 9 words mantra a long time ago, he didn't seem to be as invincible as the legends said. However, now it seemed that the 9 words mantra really did have the potential to be invincible. These thoughts only flashed through Morong Yu's mind before he focused all his attention on the rank 9 Daolord. Although the purple light affected him, the effect was too weak. It only suppressed him for a moment. One must know that the purple light had directly annihilated Patriarch Han Yi's soul. Patriarch Han, it was a supreme existence on the level of a Daolord. He was much more powerful than this rank 9 Daolord. Perhaps this was the disadvantage of the purple light. It was only effective against Spirita's experts. Otherwise, he would truly be invincible. Once the purple light was used, no matter what level of existence the opponent was, their soul would be annihilated. In this world, who could possibly be Morong Yu's opponent? Apart from the purple light, the power of chaos and the power of soul suppression also had little effect on the rank 9 Daolord. Although he was seriously injured and his combat strength had decreased greatly, he still had the combat strength of a rank 8 Daolord. His power rumbled and his aura was violent. Seeing Morong Yu kill 3 of his people in succession, the rank 9 Daolord was completely enraged. In fact, his long hair stood on end. Die! The Daolord of the 9th tier let out an explosive roar as he punched out with full force against the Chaos Edge. Clang! Amidst a shocking explosion, Morong Yu's hands were torn apart. Even his fists were shattered by the impact. At the same time, the Chaos Blade was knocked out of his hands. Pooh! Morong Yu's expression changed drastically. He instantly retreated and crashed into the depths of the ground behind him. Even though he relied on retreating to release the power from his body, he still could not help but vomit blood. Although his combat strength was heaven-defying, the difference in strength between him and a rank 9 Daolord was too great. He could not withstand a single blow. However, fortunately, Morong Yu was rich in combat experience. He released the remaining power in his body and destroyed a large area of the ground around him. Otherwise, his entire body would be blown apart. Even so, his physical body was still severely injured. The power of life gushed out crazily, quickly repairing his wounded body. But at that moment, the rank 9 Daolord had already pounced over. His hands were like eagle claws, tearing through the void and creating billions of claw shadows, wanting to claw Morong Yu to death. The situation was critical. The power of both sides surged, constantly destroying the ground and the void within a radius of billions of kilometers. Under such circumstances, Morong Yu could not even enter the Hichu Luo Shu. Therefore, he could only fight head-on. Swoosh! The river diagram and the scroll of the Luo transformed into a beautiful painting that flew straight towards the 9th tier Daolord. The rank 9 Daolord's eyes flashed with terrifying killing intent. He clawed at Hichu Luo Shu with both hands, wanting to tear Hichu Luo Shu into pieces. But to his shock, he could not tear it apart at all. Chapter 22:22. The Hichu Luo Shu was the #1 mystical book in the world. Although Muronyu was unable to unleash its full power, it was still extremely powerful. How could it be torn apart by a random person? Even a Downlord would not be able to damage the Hichu Luo Shu, let alone a Downlord. After recovering from his shock, the Downlord realized that the Hichu Luo Shu was a supreme treasure. Only supreme treasures could not be torn apart by his bare hands. Then, his furious heart was filled with joy. He grabbed with his hand, and a terrifying power erupted. He wanted to shrink the Hichu Luo Shu and take it away. Nine Cuts Mantra! Muronyu roared and struck out with the Nine Cuts Mantra again. Instantly, an illusory Great Emperor tore through the void and stepped out from the primordial era. An ancient and powerful aura burst out from the Emperor's body, suppressing the entire void, causing it to tremble and even shatter. As for the ninth-rank Downlord, he felt an incomparably dangerous aura envelop him. He knew that this great Emperor could injure him. In fact, if he could not withstand it, he would die here today. Kill! The Downlord roared fiercely. With a slap of his hand, he sent the Hichu Luo Shu flying to another side. He had temporarily given up on taking the Hichu Luo Shu. Power gathered on his fists. His fists emitted a blinding light and a terrifying aura. Then he punched out with both fists. Holy Soul Slash. Muronyu raised his soul to the peak and slashed out. At the same time, the blade of chaos that had been sent flying tore through the void and slashed towards him. Everything happened too quickly. In the blink of an eye, the Downlord and the Great Emperor clashed. After an earth-shattering explosion, the Great Emperor's figure instantly shattered. Even though the Nine Cuts Mantra was invincible, Murongyu's cultivation level was too low. He could not unleash the full power of the Nine Cuts Mantra. Otherwise, the Great Emperor could destroy the Downlord with a single strike without suffering any damage. Still, although the Downlord had managed to destroy the illusory Grand Emperor, he hadn't had it easy either. Both of his hands were shattered by the terrifying power. At the same time, his body was blasted away like a broken rag doll as he spat out blood. He was heavily injured once again. At this moment, the Saint's Soul Slash and Chaos Edge had already struck. At the same time, Muronyu controlled the purple light in the depths of his soul to explode continuously. Even though the purple light was unable to extinguish the other party's soul, even if it could only suppress it for a moment, it would still be extremely beneficial to Muronyu. Get out of my way! Although the ninth-tier Downlord had been heavily injured, he was still terrifyingly strong. As he roared, the power in his body swept out like a storm, bombarding the Saint's Soul Slash and the Blade of Chaos. Bang! Clang! The Saint's Soul Slash hadn't even been able to enter the Daelord's soul before it was shattered by the Daelord's power. At the same time, the Person of Chaos was sent flying again. In fact, this time, Murongyu's mind was so shaken that it was as if the sea had been overturned. All of them returned empty-handed. However, Muronyu didn't expect these attacks to be able to do anything to the Downlord. The only thing he could rely on now was the purple light and the Nine Cuts Mantra. Fortunately, the purple light was really effective. It didn't disappoint Muronyu. When the purple light appeared, even though the other party was a Downlord, his soul was still suppressed. Nine Cuts Mantra! Muronyu roared furiously as the Nine Cuts Mantra blasted out continuously. Instantly, one Great Emperor after another tore through the primordial void and stepped through the air, wildly attacking the Downlord. However, a split second was simply too short. Before the attacks of the Great Emperors landed on the Downlord, he had already regained consciousness. Kill! The Downlord roared repeatedly as he took out a Dao artifact and slashed wildly at the Great Emperors attacking him. At the same time, the Daelord's killing intense sword. He took a step forward, shattering the sky as he charged straight at Muronyu. After a round of battle, the underground area they were in was completely annihilated. At this moment, they were no longer deep underground, but exposed to the void. Muronyu used the army symbol art and moved like the wind as his figure shuttled straight into the void. In the blink of an eye, he was far away. However, his opponent was a Downlord. be it strength or divine abilities, he was far above him. Even though Mu-Rong-Yu was as fast as flying, the Tao Lord was like a shadow attached to his body. He was like a gangrene attached to the bone as he chased after him closely. Power erupted and the void shattered. The sky above the 9 heavens seemed to tremble violently because of the Tao Lord's attack, as if it was about to shatter. Mu-Rong-Yu continuously used the 9 Cuts mantra, wanting to use the primordial Great Emperors to kill the Tao Lord. However, he couldn't kill the Tao Lord for a while. The difference in strength between the two sides was too great. This was an extremely difficult battle. I'm from the Soul Race. If you dare to kill me, you'll be hunted down by the Soul Race. The Soul Race isn't something a mere infinite palace can compare to. After the battle, Mu-Rong-Yu spoke at the same time. As expected, the Tao Lord was stunned when he heard the 2 words Soul Race. Yes, the infinite palace was already considered powerful, but compared to the Soul Race was a true dragon that roamed the 9 heavens, and the infinite palace was at most an ant crawling on the ground. The two sides weren't on the same level at all. The infinite palace's pursuit could make him feel like dying. What if it was the Soul Race's pursuit? Then there would really be no place for him to stay in the vast sacred universe. If I kill you, the Soul Race will hunt me down. Even if I don't kill you, will you let me go? Moreover, you killed 3 of my brothers. Our enmity is irreconcilable. Today, either you die or I die. The Tao Lord's expression was ferocious and resolute. Mu-Rong-Yu groaned inwardly. Originally, he had mentioned the Soul Race to suppress the Tao Lord and then seize the opportunity to hide in the Hichu Luoshu and escape. However, the Tao Lord wasn't afraid of the Soul Race at all. A corner dog would do something desperate. Since that was the case, there was no need to say anything. He could only fight to see who was stronger. True 9 syllables soul attacks, Blade of Chaos. Relying on his formidable speed, Mu-Rong-Yu constantly blasted out all sorts of attacks. Fortunately, he also had a chaos, celestial body physique. Fortunately, he had 3,000 soul orbs, which provided him with an endless supply of soul energy at all times. Fortunately, the tree of life in his dantian was constantly devouring the drifting chaos energy in the endless chaos to replenish his strength. Otherwise, Mu-Rong-Yu's strength would have been exhausted long ago. Facing Mu-Rong-Yu's constant attacks, the Tao Lord roared furiously and unleashed his strength, bombarding Mu-Rong-Yu until he was on the verge of death. However, the more he fought, the more shocked he was. Mu-Rong-Yu's strength seemed to be endless. On the other hand, he was already on the verge of collapse. He was already heavily injured, and his strength had been greatly reduced. He also needed a portion of his strength to protect his body. Otherwise, his injuries would continue to worsen. In fact, although he was brave and invincible, he was still heavily injured in the battle. After all, whether it was the true 9 syllables, the soul attack, or the Blade of Chaos, they were all not ordinary attacks. If he was careless, he would still be injured in the end. As his injuries became more and more serious, his combat strength became weaker and weaker. On the contrary, Mu-Rong-Yu became stronger and stronger the more he fought. This was for sure. Although Mu-Rong-Yu had already broken through to the true self realm and his combat strength had greatly increased. However, he had not fully grasped and familiarized himself with it. Therefore, in the beginning, the increase in his combat strength was actually limited. However, a battle allowed one to quickly familiarize themselves with new strength and increase their combat strength. Therefore, Mu-Rong-Yu's combat strength became stronger and stronger. Coupled with his endless supply of energy and soul power, he was basically invincible. In fact, Mu-Rong-Yu did not have to kill his opponent. However, his opponent did not let him go at all. He could only fight desperately. 4 symbols formation. Perhaps he sensed that something was amiss, or perhaps he had lost his mind. In the middle of the battle, the rank 9 Tao Lord roared. He waved his hand. Rumble. Instantly, a massive array that spanned hundreds of millions of kilometers appeared out of thin air. After the array was formed, strong winds blew and the world changed color. Muronyu focused his gaze and saw that there was no longer a blue sky, white clouds, or land. At this moment, all he could see was a vast expanse of fog. This should be the array formation that the four of them used to attack me. The power of the projection is terrifying. I wonder how powerful the array formation itself is. Muronyu pondered, but he was already delighted. Perhaps this four symbols formation could allow him to turn the tables and kill the rank 9 Tao Lord. Immediately, Muronyu stood on the spot with a blank expression. At that moment, it was as if he was trapped by the array formation and could not move. This was the reaction of a normal person. Seeing this, the rank 9 Tao Lord chuckled coldly. At the same time, he had already moved and charged towards Muronyu. Originally, he could have used the four symbols formation to kill Muronyu, but that would have been too wasteful. However, that would be too much of a waste. Muronyu was so heaven-defying, yet he still wanted to use him for research. Therefore, he wanted to personally beat Muronyu until he could not take care of himself. After venting his anger, he would study him properly. Muronyu was carefully walking in a direction, but secretly, he was observing everything around him. Within the array formation, the rank 9 Tao Lord did not conceal himself at all and charged over with murderous intent. Therefore, before he could get close, Muronyu had already discovered him. "Die, you little bastard!" The Tao Lord let out an explosive roar as he appeared out of nowhere next to Muronyu. His large hand transformed into billions of claws that grabbed at Muronyu. At that moment, he saw a cold smile flash across Muronyu's face. He immediately sensed that something was amiss. At the same time, he saw Muronyu suddenly disappear from where he was and enter the depths of the array formation. It was as if he had entered a no-man's land. The rank 9 Tao Lord was instantly stunned. Just at this moment, an extremely strong and dangerous aura rapidly bombarded him from behind. Chapter 22-23. The Tao Lord turned around in shock, only to see two great emperors exploding with a terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and earth. How did these two great emperors appear behind him? How was Muronyu able to enter the four symbols formation as though there was no one there? He had already sealed off the area within the formation. Apart from him, no one else was able to move about freely. Otherwise, they would trigger an attack from the formation. These thoughts flashed through the Tao Lord's mind. He didn't have the time to think about them at all. With a single thought, he took a step forward and charged to the other side, hoping to avoid the two great emperors' attacks. Alas, it was all too late. Muronyu had already set up a shocking killing trap, waiting for this fatal blow. Bang! Bang! Almost at the same time the Tao Lord was about to dodge, the two great emperors' fists, which contained destructive power, slammed into his body. Two muffled booms rang out, and then the Tao Lord let out an agonized scream. Instantly, his entire physical body was smashed into pieces. He exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Soul Tempest. At the same time, Muronyu stepped out from the depths of the formation and launched another soul attack. He wanted to use this opportunity to destroy the Tao Lord's soul. This was because only when one's soul was destroyed would one be truly dead. Otherwise, with their cultivation level, not to mention that their physical bodies had only been destroyed once. Even if their bodies were destroyed millions of times, they might not be able to kill the other party. The reason why he used Soul Tempest instead of a more powerful single-target attack like the Holy Soul Slash was because the Tao Lord wanted to kill the other party. Muronyu didn't want any of the other party's soul to escape. Of course, the soul attack was only a part of it. The Blade of Chaos was also slashed out. Pooh! In truth, the Tao Lord was already severely injured by the two great emperors' all-out attacks. Not only was his physical body destroyed, but even his soul was permanently damaged. Therefore, although he knew that Muronyu's soul attack was coming at him from all directions, there was nothing he could do. He couldn't dodge at all. Moreover, although he was a Tao Lord, without his physical body as a foundation, how could he be a match for Muronyu? A muffled thud could be heard as the Tao Lord's soul was ground to dust. In the end, All that was left was the furious roar of the Tao Lord. I can't accept dying at the hands of a true self-expert like you. So what if you're unwilling? If you didn't ambush me first, why would I want to kill you? Murong Yu sneered in his heart. Even though he had killed 4 people, he did not dare to feel the slightest bit guilty. After all, the 4 of them were courting death. Plop. After slaying the rank 9 Tao Lord, Murong Yu's body instantly staggered, and he even felt a sense of dizziness. In the end, he sat down on the ground. Although he had already reached the true self level and was comparable to a mid-level Tao Lord in combat power, he was still a Tao Lord. However, during this period of time, he wasn't just facing mid-stage Tao Lords. He was facing supreme Tao Lords. From a moment he had launched his counterattack to the moment he had slain the 9th-ranked Tao Lord, Murong Yu's mind and heart had been stretched taut this entire time. During the battle, Murong Yu didn't feel anything. Now that he had dealt with the enemy, he felt tired. Very, very tired. It was as though his mind and heart had been completely exhausted. However, although he was very tired, Murong Yu was so tired that he wanted to sleep. This was a situation where one's mind was completely exhausted. However, he quickly forced himself to sit up in the lotus position and enter a state of cultivation. During this battle, Murong Yu had experienced life and death, and had nearly been killed by the enemy. His mind and heart had become even stronger. At the same time, his cultivation level and strength had stabilized, and there was no longer a situation where they would regress. However, his greatest gain wasn't this. It was the precious combat experience he had gained. The experience of fighting against rank 9 Tao Lords. If he had completely digested today's precious experience, then his cultivation level and combat power would not have increased. However, it would have enriched his combat experience. It must be understood that under the same level of combat power, the victor would always be the one with the most combat experience. 3 days. Murong Yu used a full 3 days to digest the benefits that this battle had brought him. Although I experienced life and death, and was nearly refined and killed, the benefits I gained were endless. However, the benefits I gained from battle are boundless. Those cultivators who only know how to cultivate but have never experienced life and death will never be able to compare with me. Murong Yu thought to himself. This was precisely why he had always been fighting and fighting. Thus, his strength had increased extremely quickly. However, rank 9 Tao Lords are still rank 9 Tao Lords. Even if they are heavily injured, they are still far from what I can fight against. If it wasn't for the 9 words mantra, I probably would have died long ago. It could be said that the 9 words mantra had saved Murong Yu. The 9 words mantra could unleash an ancient Grand Emperor to kill the enemy. Its power was extremely terrifying. However, the 9 words mantra did not only have these abilities. The reason why Murong Yu was able to cultivate his soul was because of the 9 words mantra. The 9 words mantra's human character allowed Murong Yu to cultivate his soul. The reason why Murong Yu's speed was comparable to a rank 9 Tao Lord's was also because of the 9 words mantra's army character. Otherwise, how could he have such terrifying speed? Of course, the main reason why he was able to kill the rank 9 Tao Lord was because of his physique, the Chaos Celestial Body. If it wasn't for the Chaos Celestial Body, how could he have moved freely within the formation? If he couldn't move freely within the formation, the 9 words mantra alone wouldn't have been able to kill the rank 9 Tao Lord. In the long run, this also had something to do with Murong Yu's usual cultivation. Otherwise, if he was too weak, he would have been killed long ago. In the end, whether it was the Chaos Celestial Body, the 9 words mantra, or his usual cultivation, none of these could be missing. If he had missed any of these steps, he would have been the one to die today, not the rank 9 Tao Lord. This 4 symbols formation is extremely powerful. It should have been refined long ago. It's like a magic treasure. As long as it is brought out, it can instantly form the formation. Murong Yu took a step forward and walked towards the formation core. However, ironically, the 4 of them killed many people because of the 4 symbols formation and even ambushed me. But that rank 9 Downlord still died because of the four symbols formation. Is this the cycle of karma? As Muron Yu pondered, he arrived at the formation core. There are four formation cores? Soon, Muron Yu discovered that the four symbols formation was different. In front of Muron Yu was a jade slip about the size of a palm. It was currently emitting wisps of light that illuminated the ground. An endless amount of power was constantly emanating from it. This jade slip was no ordinary jade slip. It was one of the four formation cores of the four symbols formation. Muron Yu focused his gaze and saw an illusory, true dragon roaring inside the formation. Apart from this formation core, there were three other formation cores. They were a tiger, a leopard, and an elephant. Dragon, tiger, leopard, and elephant. The so-called four symbols of the four symbols formation were referring to these four, right? Muron Yu made an attempt to retrieve the four elements great array, but he couldn't do it for the time being. In the end, he had no choice but to take out the Hichu Luo Shu and move the entire formation into the Hichu Luo Shu. In this way, he only needed to leave a strand of his divine will in the Hichu Luo Shu to study the four symbols formation. This was a rather terrifying formation. If he could use it for himself, it might play an important role in the future universe war. Right, there's also the Yin-Yang Cauldron. After collecting the formation, Muron Yu went to collect the origin tools, magic treasures, and spatial magic treasures that the four Tao Lords dropped after their deaths. Muron Xian and the others must be very anxious. Let's go back first. As he spoke, Muron Yu had already entered the Hichu Luo Shu. In fact, many teleportation talismans have been sent over when he was fighting. However, how could Muron Yu have the time to receive the teleportation talismans at that time? Moreover, even if he had the energy to do so, he wouldn't have been able to receive them. This was because these teleportation talismans had been shattered into pieces by the terrifying aftermath of their battle before they could fly to him. He directly activated the teleportation function of the Hichu Luo Shu. However, at this moment, Muron Yu also activated the time acceleration of the Hichu Luo Shu to the limit. 9 syllables mantra. With a roar in his heart, Muron Yu once again activated the 9 syllables mantra. Suddenly, the illusory Great Emperor tore through the void and stepped through the air from the ancient times. He still couldn't see the Great Emperor's appearance clearly. He only saw that the Great Emperor was a tall and mighty man, majestic and incomparably powerful. Looking at him made people feel like they were in awe of a tall mountain. Could this Great Emperor be the creator of the 9 syllables mantra? I wonder if he's still alive or dead. Muron Yu pondered in his heart. Previously, I've used the 9 syllables as one, but it couldn't really combine at all, and the Great Emperor's illusory figure couldn't appear. Could it be because I wasn't strong enough in the past? Legend has it that as long as the 9 syllables combine, one will be invincible in the world. The appearance of this Great Emperor has already shown its prowess. If I become stronger in the future, will the Great Emperor's power become stronger as well? Muron Yu was looking forward to it. As for why the Great Emperor's illusory figure would appear when the 9 syllables combine, Muron Yu didn't think deeply about this question at all. After all, even if he thought about it, he wouldn't be able to figure it out. Perhaps this was the ultimate form of the 9 syllables mantra? At this moment, Hichu Luo Shu had already teleported back to Shengzhen's camp. As soon as Muron Yu appeared, he revealed his powerful aura. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the next moment, Muron Xian, Zhang Ao, Sun Yu, and the others quickly appeared in Muron Yu's line of sight. Holy Lord, you've broken through? What a sharp killing intent. Looking at Muron Yu, Sun Yu couldn't help but take a step back, a look of surprise on his face. As for Muron Xian and the others, they took a few steps back. Muron Yu had just experienced an earth-shattering battle of life and death, killing 4 Tao Lords, one of whom was a level 9 Tao Lord. Although some time had passed, Muron Yu's killing intent and aura of battle had yet to fade. Therefore, even Sun Yu was forced to retreat. Chapter 22-24. Moronyu was stunned for a moment before he reacted. Thus, he retracted his aura. At this moment, Murong Xian and the others finally dared to approach. Otherwise, the murderous aura just now was too strong, forcing them not to approach. "Father, you're finally back. We were worried to death." Murong Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Murong Yi looked at Murongyu with a smile. "Father, it's great that you're not dead." Murong Yi was speechless. How could this guy speak like that? How could he speak like that? However, Murong Yi was also concerned about Murongyu, so he didn't say anything. "Sacred Lord, it's fortunate that the people from the Infinite Palace made a move this time. Otherwise, I'm afraid it's more ominous than auspicious." The four of them were too audacious. However, the Infinite Palace was also furious and has already flattened the entire four-symbol sect, Sun Yu said in a deep voice with a murderous aura. If the Infinite Palace hadn't made a move first, he would have brought Shenzhen's group of powerhouses to flatten the four-symbol sect, who asked their patriarchs to be so bold as to ambush and kill Murongyu. Murongyu nodded. This time, he indeed had to thank the Infinite Palace. If it weren't for the Infinite Palace's pursuit that seriously injured the four patriarchs of the four-symbol sect, how could Murongyu turn over a new leaf, killing the four patriarchs in one fell swoop? Thus, he gave a brief account of what had happened after he was captured, although he didn't say much, and he only briefly mentioned it. However, everyone kept breaking out in cold sweat as they listened. Murongyu said it without any pressure, but they knew how painful it was for Murongyu in the past month or so. How cruel and inhumane the torture he suffered. "All right, don't look so scared. Didn't I come back? Moreover, my strength has skyrocketed." Murongyu smiled and waved his hand. At the same time, he asked about the situation during this period of time. They learned that there were still a few months before they arrived at the Alliance's location. Therefore, they still had to stay here. Not long after, Murongyu went to the Infinite Palace. At this time, Shenzhen was stationed not far from the Infinite Palace. Therefore, the news of Murongyu's return had long reached the ears of the Wanliang Palace's palace master. This time, Murongyu went to thank the palace master of the Wanliang Palace. He was a man of principle. If someone saved him, he would be grateful and thankful. However, a favor was returned with a favor. Murongyu would not be truly loyal to the Wanliang Palace Master because of this matter. Being loyal to others was not Murongyu's Tao. Only with an invincible heart could he become a chaos controller. As for those who chose to be loyal, they were no longer invincible in their hearts. Regarding Murongyu's return, the Wanliang Palace Master was naturally delighted. He immediately encouraged Murongyu and gave him some essence crystals. Murongyu returned to Shenzhen's camp. After returning, he immediately entered Hichu Luo Shu. After breaking through, his strength and soul power could fuse with more vortexes. Originally, the limit of the vortexes fused with his strength and soul power was 100,000 vortexes. However, after breaking through, this limit no longer existed. He could fuse more vortexes into his strength. 200,000 or 300,000. Murongyu did not know for the time being. However, even if he fused with one more vortex, his strength would increase by a bit. If he had fused 200,000 or even 300,000 vortexes when he fought against the Four Symbols Patriarch, he would not have been defeated so miserably. Even if he could not kill a rank 9 Tao Lord, the other party could forget about killing him. First, he would increase his power vortexes. After entering Hichu Luoshu, he immediately activated the ability to accelerate time. This was his greatest advantage. To Murongyu, the short cultivation time was always his constraint. As long as he was given enough time, his strength would surpass everything. Therefore, he could only rely on Hichu Luoshu's ability to accelerate time to accumulate. 110,000 vortexes, 120,000 vortexes, 200,000 vortexes. Murongyu constantly fused vortexes, and his lethality became more and more terrifying. After breaking through to the true self realm, his strength soared by 10,000 times. In theory, the number of vortexes he could fuse would also increase by 10,000 times. However, this was impossible. However, increasing it by a few times was not a problem at all. Many years later, Muronyu felt that his vortexes of power had reached their limits again. At this time, his strength had already fused 500,000 vortexes of power. That was 5 times the previous number. 5 times the number of vortexes meant that his battle strength would increase by at least 5 times. However, that was not how it was calculated. With each additional vortex, Muronyu's battle strength would increase exponentially. Of course, it was impossible for there to be no limit. There was still a limit. Muronyu's current battle strength was at least 10 times greater than before he started cultivating. And this was before his soul had fused even more vortexes. 10 times the lethality. If I can fuse my soul into 500,000 vortexes, my strength will be even more terrifying. When that time comes, how much will my battle strength increase? Muronyu was filled with anticipation. Many more years passed. Muronyu naturally fused his soul into 500,000 vortexes as well. His battle strength once again skyrocketed. 50 times. Muronyu tested it out. His current battle strength was 50 times greater than before he started cultivating. What did 50 times mean? Before this, his battle strength was comparable to a mid-level Dao Lord. However, Muronyu was completely confident that he could sweep through any mid-level Dao Lord. Of course, if he encountered a peerless existence on the level of a Dao Lord, he would still not be a match. But at least he could escape. This was because his speed had increased by 50 times. Originally, his speed was about the same as that of one of the 4 symbols patriarchs, a Dao Lord. But now that his speed had increased by 50 times, the Dao Lord of the 4 symbols sect could only eat dust behind him. Actually, speed was also a part of battle strength. At least my life-saving ability has increased explosively on the battlefield this time. Muronyu was very satisfied. Although his battle prowess did not increase to a higher level, he was already satisfied. After all, he was only at the true self realm now. Yes, the true self realm has the terrifying battle strength to sweep through mid-level Dao Lords. This is definitely the best medicine for sneaky people. Muronyu chuckled as he came out of the Hichu Luo Shu. At this moment, a few months had passed in the Holy World. A few days after Muronyu came out, he received the order to set off for the Alliance. Thus, under the lead of the Infinite Palace, 100,000 forces and 100 trillion cultivators marched toward the Alliance in a grand manner. What did a trillion cultivators mean? Vast and majestic, extremely spectacular and shocking. However, compared to the vast and boundless universe, a trillion cultivators were just some insignificant life forms. This was because there were simply too many life forms in the universe. Even the smallest galaxy had more than 100 trillion cultivators. The Pluto Galaxy. This was a galaxy with an extremely harsh living environment. Ferocious beasts ran rampant, and there were all kinds of celestial traps and dangers everywhere. Before this, there were basically no factions or sects here, and the number of cultivators was pitifully small. However, after the Sacred Cosmos Alliance set up this place as the Alliance headquarters, the Alliance's experts had stationed themselves here in large numbers. Ferocious beasts running rampant? Kill them all. Obliterate them all. Many traps? They were all razed to the ground. Thus, in a short period of time, this place became the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's headquarters. It was difficult to see any powerful ferocious beasts or terrifying traps. When Muronyu arrived, he discovered that the entire galaxy was covered in layers of formations and restrictions. From afar, the entire Pluto galaxy was shrouded in clouds and mist, and one's divine consciousness could not extend it at all. Among these formations and restrictions, offensive and defensive formations took up most of them. After all, this was the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's headquarters, so it was bound to be heavily protected. Otherwise, if the Sacred Cosmos or Sacred Cosmos experts were the first to break through, everyone would laugh their heads off. In the entire Pluto galaxy, densely packed armies were stationed in different places. Murong used trillion cultivators were like a drop of water in the ocean when they entered this army. It was not enough to reach the apex, not to mention Shenzhen's 2 armies. At the same time, the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's headquarters, Pluto Galaxy, Main Hall. Thousands of people were gathered here. Although there were only 1,000 people here, which one of them wasn't a peerless expert with a prominent status. Those who were qualified to enter this place were all deacons of the Alliance. 1 Alliance leader, 10 vice leaders, 100 elders, and 1,000 deacons. This was the pinnacle of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's power pyramid. The most prominent and powerful big shots in the entire Sacred Cosmos. However, these people all looked gloomy. The latest news is that most of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's power has been invested in the Martial Dao universe. Their military strength is ferocious, and their battle power is terrifying. The Martial Dao universe is not waiting for death either. They are now fighting with the Sacred Cosmos. A large number of cultivators and experts are dying every day. However, both sides are in a stalemate. The Martial Dao universe is unable to drive the Sacred Cosmos invaders out in a short time. The Sacred Cosmos is also unable to attack the Martial Dao universe. A vice leader of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance said in a low voice. However, the gloominess on the faces of the people in the hall became more and more intense. Originally, they should be happy to see such a situation. Why was it like this? The Sacred Cosmos is collapsing every day. It is not far from destruction. The Sacred Cosmos has been attacking the Martial Dao universe for a long time. Now they're in full swing. According to the news I received, their next target is our Sacred Cosmos. Old Ancestor Hun, who is also one of Murong-Yu's clones, said in a low voice. As soon as he finished speaking, every big shot's body shook slightly. This day had finally come. Fortunately, they had prepared for a rainy day. Now that the alliance had been established, the experts from all sides had been sent over. It was enough to resist the invasion of the Sacred Cosmos. However, when they thought of how powerful the Sacred Cosmos was, the big shots' faces turned pale. Most of the Sacred Cosmos is fighting with the Martial Dao universe. Less than 10% of their forces are targeting us. Whether it is in terms of experts or military strength, they're not very strong. Old Ancestor Han, said slowly. Chapter 22-25. Less than 10% of the army wasn't very strong. Even though Ancestor Han, said so, the thousands of people present remained silent. In fact, every single one of them had a grave expression on their faces. In fact, this was only 1% of the Divine Universe's army. However, this was still a terrifying army, enough to suppress the entire Divine Universe. Otherwise, why would the Divine Universe only send this many soldiers? They must have thought that less than 10% of their forces would be enough to sweep across the Sacred Universe and suppress the Sacred Universe. Otherwise, they could have sent more troops to attack the Divine Universe in one fell swoop. Then, they would use the Divine Universe as a shield to attack the Martial Universe. After a long while, another deputy leader said slowly, "We can only counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir." There were 10 deputy leaders in the Divine Universe, and each of them represented a colossal force. For example, Forefather Hun, represented the Soul Race. It could be said that the 10 vice leaders of the Sacred Universe represented the 10 greatest peak forces of the Sacred Universe apart from the super forces that did not appear in the world. Although the Divine Universe's cultivators are known for their ferocity, they're always shrouded in the aura of death. Since they've come from afar to attack our Sacred Universe, we'll have to fight this battle well. It'll be best if we can kill them outside our Sacred Universe. At the very least, we'll have to stop them outside our universe. Otherwise, if they invade the Divine Universe, it'll be too much damage to us, an elder said. Hearing this, everyone nodded their heads. Another elder said in a deep voice, "If we can wipe out the invaders, we can strike a blow to their morale." Perhaps the martial Tao universe will gain the upper hand because of this and blast the divine universe out of the martial Tao universe? I'm afraid that's not appropriate. If the divine universe is defeated by the martial universe, they'll definitely attack our divine universe with their defeated army. At that time, we won't be able to stop them, an elder said. Are we going to let them invade our divine universe? If that's the case, our divine universe won't be far from destruction. Someone disagreed. The elder who spoke earlier shook his head slowly. Don't deny my idea yet. I have a suggestion. Do you have any suggestions? A deputy leader looked at the elder who spoke. The elder continued. We need to stop the God universe's forces outside the sacred universe. But we don't want to beat them too hard or even cripple them. We only need to confront them outside the universe. Old ancestor Hun E, who was also Murong Yu's clone, had a glint in his eyes. At the same time, the others also reacted. They were all top-tier great beings in the sacred universe. None of them were idiots. You're saying that we'll confront them outside the sacred universe and prevent them from taking a single step forward, but we won't be willing to leave. This way, we can delay until the end of the war between the martial Tao universe and the divine Tao universe, an elder said with joy. In fact, the meaning of this sentence was to delay less than 10% of the enemy's forces. They couldn't invade, but they couldn't bear to leave. This way, the divine cosmos would not send reinforcements. By then, the sacred universe would be safe. Good, that's what we should do. However, the divine Tao universe is coming aggressively. We have to start the first battle and beat them hard. We have to let them know that the sacred universe is not to be trifled with. A deputy leader said coldly, with murderous intent. What? We're going to the battlefield? At Shengzhen's camp, Murong Xian and the others were surprised when they received the news that they were going to the battlefield. Didn't they say that the war hadn't started yet? However, Murong Yu already knew about it, so he wasn't surprised. Of course, he didn't say anything to the others. This time, they were going to the battlefield in absolute secrecy because they were going to ambush the divine Tao universe. There was a universe between the sacred universe and the divine Tao universe. It was a broken universe that had been destroyed long ago. Legend had it that this universe used to be more powerful than the divine Tao universe and even the martial Tao universe. But it was a pity that the universe died overnight. Moreover, this universe was different from the sacred universe. There were only vast continents in the entire universe. There were no planets. However, at this moment, the continents in the entire universe were barren, as if after a huge earthquake. Other than some weeds and ferocious beasts, there was nothing else. This was because other than the dense death aura, there was no chi of heaven and earth in the entire universe. All cultivators needed chi of heaven and earth. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to improve their cultivation at all. Therefore, other than those plants and ferocious beasts that swallowed the death aura, no cultivators usually came here. Of course, other cultivators couldn't come to this universe was also an important reason. In reality, only great Tao realm experts could roam freely in the endless primal chaos, leaping from one universe to another. This was because the two universes weren't connected together. Instead, they crossed an extremely long, chaotic zone. Legend had it that there were countless treasures in the chaotic zone. Moreover, they were all supreme treasures, even more precious than Tao artifacts. However, no one in the sacred universe had supreme treasures of this level. This was because in the endless chaos, there was only chaos. There was no direction at all, nor was there any chi of heaven and earth. Moreover, there was extremely strong pressure. When ordinary people entered the endless chaos, they would be crushed and eventually return to the endless chaos. Great virtue realm powerhouses could resist this pressure and enter the endless chaos freely. However, if they lost their direction in the endless chaos, they could only stay in the endless chaos forever and be alone. Moreover, since ancient times, there were many great virtue realm powerhouses who were lost in the endless chaos. Therefore, Although there were supreme treasures in the chaos, very few people would rush out of the universe and enter the chaos. However, the Almighty of the sacred universe had built a teleportation array between the sacred universe and the broken universe. Therefore, the soldiers of the Sacred Universe Alliance didn't need to cross the endless chaos and could directly teleport to the broken universe. It was the same for the divine universe. The existence of this broken universe happened to be the buffer zone between the sacred universe and the divine universe. Otherwise, if the divine universe directly attacked the sacred universe's losses would be terrifying. It's very oppressive here. There's no chi of heaven and earth. We can only rely on origin crystals to recover. Murong Xian looked at the dark sky and said unhappily. They had already teleported to the broken universe and set up camp. Therefore, you have to pay attention to the control of your power on the battlefield. Otherwise, no matter how high your realm is, if you don't have power, you won't be able to withstand a single blow, Murong Yu said in a low voice. Not only that, but the death aura in the broken universe was also constantly attacking their physical bodies. Once it was contaminated, they would be injured and their combat power would decrease. Therefore, even if they didn't fight, they had to consume a certain amount of power to resist the invasion of the death aura. It could be said that even if they didn't fight, they would constantly consume their power. Fortunately, the supplies we need are all provided by the Alliance. Awesome, Li Ling said with a smile. What's the use of these things? Murong Xian was a little disdainful. The Alliance's supplies are only enough for us when we're not fighting. If there's a big battle, it won't be enough at all. In my opinion, it's more reliable to snatch the resources of other places. Everyone in the divine universe was an invader. No one in the sacred universe would be lenient. They would just kill them. You guys do as you see fit. Don't say anything else. Quickly familiarize yourself with the environment here. Murong Yu waved his hand. He didn't care about the consumption of power. In the broken universe, other than the death aura, there wasn't even chaos energy. In fact, the death aura was just a type of chaos energy. However, Murong Yu couldn't directly absorb the death aura. However, he had the tree of life. Every single moment, the tree of life could absorb a tremendous amount of chaotic force from the endless chaos and supply it to him endlessly, making him inexhaustible. Therefore, even in the broken universe, he wouldn't be in danger of exhausting his power. This was a huge advantage. In the tent, the Wanliang Palace's palace master sat boldly on the main seat, while Murong Yu and the others stood on either side. According to the intelligence, the divine universe's vanguard will be here soon. The mission given to us by the higher-ups is to ambush these people. We don't need to kill all of them. We just need to severely injure their vanguard. This is our first battle. I hope everyone won't disappoint me. The Wanliang Palace Master's eyes flashed with a cold light as he glanced at everyone. Everyone was shocked. They knew that the Wanliang Palace Master wanted to take the credit. Only with enough military credit would his position in the Alliance rise. Therefore, everyone quickly expressed their stance. Murong Yu also pretended to be the same as everyone else. The Wanliang Palace Master waved his hand. Immediately, a picture scroll condensed from power unfolded in front of everyone. Murong Yu only took a glance and knew that this was a part of the map of the broken world. However, it was extremely far away from the place where they set up camp. The Wanliang Palace Master pointed to a point on the map. This is the place where the divine universe's army must pass. Our mission is to ambush here. Murong Yu looked over and saw that it was a towering mountain range with overgrown weeds. It was the best place to set up an ambush. Moreover, the broken universe's suppression of spiritual sense was extremely brutal. By the time the divine universe's people discovered the ambush, it would be too late to retreat. In this battle, it's not just our Wanliang Palace. There are many forces involved in the ambush. Therefore, we can only win and not lose. In the end, the Wanliang Palace Master warned in a deep voice. Chapter 22-26. With Shenzhen's 1 billion cultivators, Murong Yu was lying in ambush at the designated location. Apart from Shenzhen, there were 100,000 forces from the Infinite Palace. There were even many captain-level forces like the Infinite Palace lying in ambush here. There were trillions of troops lying in ambush. This was a war between universes. There were easily trillions of cultivators. Apart from these ordinary cultivators, there were also a large number of Great Tao Realm experts. This place is really suitable for ambush. There are trillions of experts lying in ambush here, but we can't see anything from afar? Murong Xian exclaimed. If this wasn't a broken universe, but a sacred or divine universe, they wouldn't be able to lay an ambush with so many people. Just by gathering together, that terrifying aura would spread far and wide, shooting straight into the sky. Even if they hid, they couldn't hide completely. But now, they were lying in ambush in the broken world, just like a mortal army lying in ambush. They couldn't see anything strange. So, the broken universe is used as a battlefield. Pay attention. Today, we can ambush the Divine Universe's team. But in the future, the Divine Universe's people can also ambush us. With our strength, once we fall into an ambush, the consequences will be unimaginable, Murong Yu said in a deep voice. Everyone nodded, knowing how serious this matter was. Originally, Shenzhen's overall strength wasn't very good. If they fell into the encirclement of the Divine Universe, they would probably be completely wiped out. Moreover, this was a war, so the chances of falling into an ambush were very high. After lying in ambush for a few days, the Divine Universe's people were still nowhere to be seen. Fortunately, everyone was a powerful cultivator and didn't need to eat or drink at all. Although he had lost a portion of his strength in the process of resisting the invasion of the Death Aura, he had been able to recover his strength by absorbing crystals or pills. Otherwise, the problem of eating and drinking for trillions of people would be a headache for the Sacred Universe Alliance. They're here. Everyone, pay attention. On this day, Murong Yu's heart trembled slightly. In the depths of his soul, he seemed to see a blurry image. In the distance, a large group of people, trillions of cultivators, were rushing over like a flood. Those people should be the Divine Universe's people. Could he foresee the arrival of the godly universe? This was a great divine ability that appeared after Murong Yu's cultivation level increased. Or was this the ability to deduce the secrets of the heavens? Of course, it was impossible for Murong Yu to predict the future. He was able to see the people from the Divine Universe in advance because they were not too far away from the ambush. Otherwise, if the distance was too far, Murong Yu would not be able to see it. Murong, Xian, Duanmu Qing, and the others were shocked. Not long after, a terrifying aura that could tear the heavens and earth apart swept over from afar. Wherever it passed, the deathly aura of the shattered universe was forced to scatter to the sides. His imposing manner was like a torrential river. There were so many people that one couldn't see the end of them. Even compared to the sacred cosmos's ambush, it was about the same. This was only the enemy's vanguard. However, what made Murong Yu heave a sigh of relief was that although the Divine Universe was stronger than the Saint Universe on the whole, the Divine Universe was much stronger than the Saint Universe. However, the average cultivation level of these vanguard troops was not much higher than theirs. Most of them were Celestial Realm and True Self Realm cultivators. Although the Divine Universe was powerful, most of them were cultivators below the Great Tao Realm. Even though there were more Great Tao Realm powerhouses than the Saint Universe, it was impossible for them to be everywhere. Wait for us to go over first before making a move. Looking at the invaders from the Divine Universe, Murong Yu's heart was surging with excitement. The cultivators who had never seen such a big lineup were even more excited and nervous. The Divine Universe's army flew past rapidly like a torrent. These people were all flying without regard for anything. They did not need to worry about the consumption of power at all. Indeed, their God universe was about to be destroyed. What they had to do now was to take down the Saint Universe and the Martial Tao Universe as quickly as possible. As for the origin crystals and various other resources, so what if they were used up? As long as they took down these two universes, they could replenish their resources. Otherwise, they would all die. Murongyu did not know how the Saint Universe had obtained the information. Seeing God Universe's army enter their ambush circle without any preparation, God Universe's army entered their ambush circle. After half a day, trillions of people finally entered the ambush circle. Attack! Kill these damned invaders! At this moment, an earth-shattering roar came from afar. At the same time, waves of terrifying power erupted. All kinds of brilliant power light soared into the sky, almost illuminating the dark sky. Attack! Kill! Murongyu roared. He took the lead and soared into the sky from the ambush. His entire body was filled with terrifying power. Immediately, he unleashed the Soul Storm and ruthlessly tore at the Divine Universe's army that had yet to react. Kill! Murongxian and the others also made their moves. One after another, they unleashed their strongest attacks, bombarding the invaders with all their might. Poof! 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 Wherever Murongyu's soul power passed, the cultivators from the Divine Universe died. It could be said that they died in large numbers. Under one attack, millions of people's souls were shattered and they died a violent death. However, millions of people were nothing compared to an army that numbered in the trillions. Therefore, Murongyu continued to attack. Buzz! The chaos blade swallowed and spat out a light that made people's souls tremble. It slashed out fiercely. Suddenly, a huge blade light that was hundreds of millions of square meters swept out and slashed toward the Divine Universe army. This was a Tao Lord level attack. How could the ordinary soldiers of the Divine Universe resist it? They could not resist at all. Therefore, wherever the blade light passed, large numbers of people died. These people were all invaders. If they invaded the Divine Universe, then the people of the Divine Universe would be exterminated. Therefore, Murongyu did not hesitate to kill. Being merciful to the enemy was being cruel to oneself. If Murongyu let them go today, would they let the people of the Divine Universe go tomorrow? No. Therefore, the two sides were actually mortal enemies. It was either you die or I die. After being ambushed, hundreds of millions or even billions of cultivators died in an instant. The people of the Divine Universe did not expect that the people of the Divine Universe could predict the future and actually set up an ambush here. They also did not expect that the people of the Divine Universe would dare to ambush them here. Therefore, for a moment, they were all stunned. Counterattack! Counterattack! Kill these ants of the Divine Universe. Once we kill them, we'll be able to charge straight into the sacred universe and take over it. Brothers, think about the universe we are about to destroy. If we don't fight with our lives, we won't even have a home. We can only die. Suddenly, an angry roar came from the crowd. Wherever the voice passed, the stunned cultivators of the Divine Universe woke up from their stupor. In an instant, their eyes turned red. Kill! Kill these ants and snatch the Divine Universe. The cultivators of the Divine Universe roared and launched a desperate counterattack. For our home, we must kill these invading scum today. Brothers, let's kill them. Leave no one alive. A great Tao realm powerhouse from the Divine Universe roared. They killed crazily. Swoosh! Suddenly, a shocking sword light burst out from the army of the Divine Universe. The sword light was about 100 million miles in size. It carried a destructive aura and annihilated the void. It slashed down fiercely towards Shenzhen. The moment he saw the sword light, Murongyu's eyelids twitched violently. This was an attack from a great Tao realm powerhouse, and a Tao lord at that. In the entire glory sect, there weren't many people who could handle this. If he slashed down, Shenzhen's 1 billion people would probably be wiped out. Oomph! Sun Yu and the other Tao lords snorted and were about to attack. However, they were stopped by Murongyu. You don't have to attack. You just need to stay in the crowd and try your best to protect our Shenzhen soldiers from being killed by the great Tao realm powerhouse. Leave this person to me. Murongyu sneered as he stepped into the air. Swoosh! With a flash, he had already stepped out and stood in the sky under the sword light. The divine universe doesn't even have a great Dao realm powerhouse. They actually want a true self-realm ant to block it. He's simply courting death. Seeing that Murong Yu, a true self-realm cultivator, dared to block the sword light of a Dao lord, the people of the divine universe were all disdainful. While they were feeling disdainful, Murong Yu had already made his move. He didn't seem to have done anything, but he punched out. In front of the sword light that was 100 million miles in size, Murong Yu's fist was like a dust star on the ground. However, it was just a punch. Crack! The terrifying sword light that carried the might of heaven and earth instantly exploded under Murong Yu's fist. It was instantly annihilated. As for Murong Yu, he stood in the sky without moving, dominating the world. The might of the Holy Master is invincible. Looking at this scene, everyone from Glory Sect was greatly encouraged as they cheered. Their morale was high. On the other hand, the divine universe was stunned. Didn't they say that the cultivators of the divine universe were generally very weak? Why was this true self-realm cultivator so powerful? He shattered the attack of a Dao Lord with one punch? Were the people of the divine universe all so powerful? If they were all so powerful, then how could the divine universe be their match? They were just going to be slaughtered, right? In an instant, the morale of the divine universe was infinitely low. They were frightened by Murong Yu. All of you, take a hit from me too. Looking at the army of the divine universe below, Murong Yu sneered. Suddenly, he slashed down with his saber. Swoosh! It was exactly the same as the sword light attack of the divine universe, just now. However, the power contained in the strike was even more terrifying. Before it slashed down, the divine universe powerhouses felt their souls tremble. Chapter 22-27. You're courting death. A cold snort came from the crowd. The voice was not loud, but it suppressed all the worlds and reached Murong Yu's ears clearly. At the same time, a figure stepped into the air from the crowd. It was a middle-aged man, a supreme being at the Dao Lord level. He looked at Murong Yu with murderous intent and made a hand seal with both hands. Immediately after, a hand seal shattered the heavens and earth as it rapidly met Murong Yu's blade light. The Chaos Blade contained the power of chaos and soul suppression. It could mess up everything and suppress the opponent's soul. However, it needed to be close to or in contact with the opponent. This person knew how terrifying the Chaos Blade was, so he directly struck out with his power, wanting to shatter the blade light in the void. At the same time, the many cultivators from the divine cosmos beneath Murong Yu's feet roared as well. They either unleashed their strongest attacks or brought out their primal artifacts and magic treasures to furiously attack Murong Yu. They were all invaders, and their intentions were to be killed. Murong Yu sneered, and the 3,000 soul balls in his soul space went berserk. Soul power broke out of the soul space like stormy waves and swept out. Soul storm. Whoosh wherever the soul storm passed. A large number of cultivators in the divine universe died quickly. They could not resist at all. In an instant, the area millions of miles around Murong Yu became a vacuum. This was an army. How many cultivators were gathered in 1,000,000 miles? Millions of people were necessary, or even tens of millions of people. Just this attack alone was enough to make the enemy's experts furious. If this continued, although there were hundreds of millions of them, they would not be able to withstand a few slaps from an expert at Murong Yu's level. However, even after their deaths, their attacks were still directed at Murong Yu. Murong Yu was very confident in himself. However, he was not arrogant. He had already taken out Hichu Luo Shu. Hichu Luo Shu floated in the air above his head, and rays of yellow light shone down, enveloping his entire body. As for the incoming attacks, they were shattered the moment they came into contact with the light. Everything happened in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. Murong Yu's saber light only collided with the opposing Dao Lord's hand seal after exterminating these people. Boom! After an earth-shattering explosion, both the handprint and the blade light were instantly shattered. The aftermath of the power that was emitted directly annihilated the surrounding void. Retreat quickly. Seeing how terrifying Murong Yu's group attack was, a roar came from the God Universe army. At the same time, several great Tao realm experts soared into the sky. His divine sense had long since locked onto Murong Yu, and he charged over violently. In an instant, Murong Yu sensed that over 10 great Tao realm experts had locked onto him. However, his expression did not change. In fact, he even executed the army character technique. Instead of retreating, he advanced and charged straight at the great Tao realm experts. At the same time, the cultivators below the great Tao realm rapidly retreated, not daring to stay here any longer. In fact, other than preparing to surround and kill Murong Yu, some of the great Tao realm experts from the God Universe had already attacked the ordinary soldiers behind Murong Yu. Kill! Murong Yu did not pay attention to those people. Instead, he let out a roar and charged over with the Chaos Blade in his hand. Kill him. Basically, Murong Yu was the second great Tao realm expert to attack. The first to attack was the great Tao realm expert from the God Universe. He had slashed out that sword light first. If not for this, Murong Yu would not have attacked at all. After all, great Tao realm experts were great generals and would not attack easily. Over 10 great Tao realm experts unleashed their strongest attacks, attacking Murong Yu crazily. In an instant, the void where Murong Yu was annihilated by countless powers. With the Hichu Luoshu above his head and the Chaos Blade in his hand, Murong Yu executed the army character technique and charged left and right amidst the violent powers. In an instant, he had broken out of the encirclement and charged into the group of great Tao realm experts. Soul Storm. It was still a soul attack. After using the soul attack, he locked onto one of the initial level Tao lords and slashed down fiercely. Swoosh! The Soul Storm was Murong Yu's most powerful area of effect battle technique. It directly covered over 10 great Tao realm experts, forcing them to withdraw their powers and defend their souls. However, the countenance of the initial level Tao lord that Murong Yu had locked onto changed drastically. Apart from the Soul Storm, he also had to face the power of chaos and the power of soul suppression. The power of chaos caused his thoughts and powers to become chaotic. The power of soul suppression caused his soul to be suppressed. Therefore, he only had time to reveal a look of horror on his face. He did not have time to defend or dodge at all. Pooh! With a raise of his hand and a slash, a huge head flew high into the air. When the head flew up, he no longer had any signs of life on his body. His soul had already been shattered when his head fell to the ground. The first great Tao realm expert was killed. Moreover, he had almost no ability to fight back. The most terrifying thing was that he had died under the blade of a mere true self realm cultivator. This little bastard is quite strange. He's an expert of the soul race. Join forces with us and kill him. A Tao lord from the divine universe roared in a low voice. He once again locked onto Murong Yu and attacked. The other 10 or so great Tao realm experts were also furious and attacked crazily. However, Murong Yu roared continuously. Relying on his speed that was comparable to a level 9 Tao lord, he constantly shuttled through the crowd. Soul Storm, 10,000 layers of soul waves, Chaos Blade, and various other powerful battle techniques and magic treasures were constantly used by him. He did not fight them head-on at all. Pooh! Not long after, another high-level initial Tao realm expert was killed by Murong Yu. The ordinary soldiers of the divine universe were all scared off. When they saw Murong Yu flying over, they quickly retreated. There was no choice. Murong Yu's Soul Storm was simply too terrifying. Once he executed it, even great Tao realm experts would not dare to take it head-on, let alone them. Therefore, wherever Murong Yu passed by, these invaders from the divine universe would die in large numbers like wheat being harvested. There were countless casualties. Swoosh! 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 More and more great Tao realm experts rushed over from afar and started to attack Murong Yu. In a short period of time, there were already more than 20 great Tao realm experts locking onto Murong Yu and attacking him. More than 20 great Tao realm experts surrounded and killed a true self-realm cultivator. Most importantly, this cultivator was completely unharmed. Instead, people from the divine universe kept dying. This scene shocked everyone who saw it. What kind of monster is this? He's actually so terrifying. Are all the people from the sacred universe such monsters? The ordinary soldiers of the divine universe were almost scared to death. On the other hand, the morale of the Sacred Universe Alliance was high, especially Shangzhen and the others. It was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Under the leadership of the many upper echelons, the Divine Universe soldiers were forced to retreat, especially the Chaos Army and the Sacred Suppression Army. Under the leadership of Murong Xian, Jia Shui, and the others, they killed their way in and out of the Divine Universe Army. They were extremely valiant. However, the overall quality of the Divine Universe was still slightly stronger than that of the Sacred Universe. Although they were ambushed and were stunned at the beginning, they quickly recovered. However, they quickly reacted and launched a frenzied attack. At this moment, the Great Tao Realm experts from both sides also attacked. Great Tao Realm experts, even initial Tao Realm experts, could kill countless true self-realm and selfless realm cultivators with a single slap. Therefore, they were the great killing machines on the battlefield. Fortunately, both sides had a large number of Great Tao Realm experts. Very soon, the Great Tao Realm experts from both sides clashed, preventing them from attacking the soldiers below the Great Tao Realm. Generals against generals, soldiers against soldiers. Although this was the case, the killing prowess of ordinary soldiers was still quite terrifying. On the entire battlefield, there would be a large number of cultivators dying every instant. This was the case for both the Sacred Universe and the Divine Universe. Blood flowed like a river. Broken limbs, minced flesh, and bones flew all over the sky. The thick smell of blood filled the area within a range of hundreds of millions of miles, not dissipating for a long time. Suddenly, an incomparably mournful scream fiercely rang out. A great Tao realm expert from the Sacred Universe had died. Murong knew this person as well. He was one of the 100,000 forces in the Boundless Palace. There was only one great Tao realm expert. After this person died, the great Tao realm expert from the Divine Universe led his army and wiped out the 1 billion soldiers of the fallen great Tao realm expert in just a few breaths' time. In reality, apart from Shangzhen's army, which still maintained a complete formation and did not suffer great losses, the other forces had also died. The other forces had suffered great losses. It was very normal for hundreds of millions of people to die. Of course, this did not mean that the battle prowess of Shangzhen's army was much stronger than the others. Instead, Shangzhen's great Tao realm experts were much more than them. These great Tao realm experts did not show off. Instead, they hid in the army and fought together with the army. Because of their existence, Shangzhen's losses were basically negligible. On the contrary, the number of enemies killed by Shangzhen's army far exceeded the number of enemies killed by the other forces. This was the effect of pinnacle experts. The casualties were great, but the most eye-catching thing was the battle between Murong Yu and the others in the sky. At this moment, Murong Yu's opponents had reached over 30. Fortunately, these people were not very strong. There were almost no high-level Tao lords, let alone Tao lords. Therefore, Murong Yu could still rely on his powerful speed to fight with them ferociously. In fact, the great Tao realm experts from the Divine Universe were dying continuously. Although Murong Yu was covered in blood, most of the blood on his body was from the enemies. Even though he was injured, his life force washed over him, allowing him to recover to his peak state. The most terrifying thing was that after such a long battle, his strength did not seem to be depleted at all. On the other hand, not long after their opponents attacked with their full strength, they needed to swallow pills or absorb origin crystals to recover their strength. Chapter 22-28. Behind both armies, some of the upper echelons of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance and the Divine Cosmos Alliance floated in the void and watched the battle. Every moment, millions of people would die. However, these upper echelons and big shots expressions did not change at all. Or perhaps, to them, these ordinary cultivators were just cannon fodder. In order to win the battle, millions of people would die every moment. It did not matter even if it was 10 million or 100 million people. However, their gazes were not on those ordinary cultivators who were killing each other. Instead, they were focused on the great battle in the sky. There were only a few dozen people fighting in the sky, but it attracted the attention of the upper echelons of both sides. That's right. This was the battle between Murong Yu and the great Tao realm experts of the divine cosmos. Who is that person? A true self-realm cultivator is able to resist 30 to 40 great Tao realm experts of the divine cosmos. His battle prowess is not bad. Behind the Sacred Cosmos Alliance, a middle-aged man who was surrounded by people like stars suddenly spoke. The surrounding great Tao realm experts were at a loss because they did not know Murong Yu at all. They had not even seen Murong Yu before. At that moment, the myriad amount palace master took a step forward and bowed to the middle-aged man. Then, he said respectfully, "Lord Deacon, that person is Murong Yu. He is one of my capable subordinates. His battle prowess is heaven-defying. Since the start of the battle, he has already killed 10 great Tao realm experts of the divine cosmos." The Sacred Cosmos Alliance actually had a deacon commanding the battle here. However, this was also very normal. In fact, it was not surprising for the Sacred Cosmos to send out an elder. Swoosh, everyone looked at the myriad amount palace master in surprise. The deacon from the Sacred Cosmos also revealed a surprised expression. "Dongju, I didn't expect you to have such a genius. This person has to be nurtured well. You have also nurtured a capable general for the Alliance. I will remember your contribution." Therefore, everyone looked at the myriad amount palace master, who was also Dongju, with envy and jealousy in their eyes. They all knew that the myriad amount palace master had not even taken action yet. However, the deacon had already regarded him in a different light. If Murong Yu's contribution was greater, the palace master of the Wanliang Palace would probably be put in an important position by the deacon. On the other hand, the Infinite Palace expressed its gratitude happily. This old fox was also an old fox. Murong Yu was not trained by him at all. However, he didn't even blush when he took the credit for it. Murong Yu was completely oblivious to this as he continued to fight. On the other side, the big shots of the divine universe were watching everything. "My lord, although this kid is only at the true self realm, he has already killed over 10 of our great Tao realm experts. If we allow him to continue his rampage, I'm afraid it will affect our morale. Now, our morale has been greatly affected. Why don't you let me kill him?" Finally, the exports of the divine universe could no longer sit still. A cultivator at the level of a Tao Lord requested to join the battle, intending to kill Murong Yu. "All right, leaving such a person alive is a disaster. Go and kill him," the big shot from God Universe said in a low voice. Hence, that great Tao realm expert had already taken a step out and instantly disappeared on the spot, although he was besieged by 30 to 40 great Tao realm experts. However, by relying on his frightening speed, Murong Yu was able to fight them to a standstill. In fact, Murong Yu even occasionally killed their great Tao realm experts. All of a sudden, Murong Yu's heart was suddenly enveloped by an extremely intense aura of death. The aura was so strong that even his soul started to tremble intensely. A Tao Lord expert has made his move. Murong Yu instantly reacted in his heart. Following that, he let out a furious roar. He instantly condensed all of his strength on the surface of his body. At the same time, a punch blasted out rapidly. During this process, his figure also retreated rapidly. Boom! Right at this moment, a fist that wasn't very big suddenly appeared out of thin air. The fist was the same as an ordinary person's fist, but in the eyes of everyone, it seemed incomparably huge, like an immemorial primordial star. It emitted a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth, intimidating heaven and earth, shaking the heavens. Boom, boom, boom. A large amount of the void where the fist was located was annihilated, and a huge black hole actually appeared. And this black hole was rapidly expanding in all directions. All the power and even light that came into contact with the black hole were directly devoured. They disappeared without a trace. If Murong Yu was devoured, he would probably be instantly annihilated like those power and light. Oh no! The moment the fist appeared, the palace master of the Wanliang Palace in the distance shouted in his heart. At the same time, he had already taken a step forward and charged towards Murong Yu. Although Murong Yu's battle prowess was heaven-defying, the gap between him and a Dao Lord was huge. If a Dao Lord expert was the emperor among cultivators, then Murong Yu was an ant among cultivators. There was an insurmountable gap between the two. However, the other party, a dignified Dao Lord expert, actually wanted to launch a sneak attack on Murong Yu. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Murong Yu with a single strike. He didn't allow anyone else to save him. Indeed, even if the palace master of the Wanliang Palace made a move, it was completely too late. Just as the palace master of the Wanliang Palace, Dongju, took a step forward, the attack of the Dao Lord expert was about to bombard Murong Yu. If Murong Yu took this attack head-on, he would definitely be killed. A cold light flashed through the eyes of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's deacon. Murong Yu was a genius, a young man worth nurturing. If he was given enough time, he would definitely become an extremely powerful Dao Lord expert. Therefore, he wouldn't allow Murong Yu to be killed by the Dao Lord expert. Therefore, he made a move. Your opponent is me. Just as the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's deacon made a move, that big shot from the Divine Cosmos Alliance also made a move. He actually blocked the attack of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's deacon. Even if he only blocked it for an instant, Murong Yu would die 1,000,000,000 times over. Apart from himself, no one else could save him. Murong Yu knew this very well. Therefore, he never put his life in the hands of others. He had to try to save himself. Hichu Luo Shu. Murong Yu roared furiously in his heart. Immediately, the He Tu and the inscription of the Luo that was originally floating in the void above his head began to spread out. In a fraction of a second, the Hichu Luo Shu had transformed into a painting that covered the heavens and the earth. At the same time, under Murong Yu's control, the Hichu Luo Shu directly blocked in front of him. At the same time, he continued to retreat explosively. Myriad waves of soul, blade of chaos, 9 syllables of truth. Bang! Hichu Luo Shu wasn't able to block the Dao Lord's attack at all, and he was sent flying by a single punch. Fortunately, Hichu Luo Shu was the #1 book in the world, and it wasn't something that a mere Dao Lord could shatter. Therefore, Hichu Luo Shu hadn't suffered any damage at all. However, Hichu Luo Shu was only equivalent to a Dao Lord level Dao artifact. The might that it emanated was extremely limited, so Hichu Luo Shu had only been able to offset a small portion of the attack, and the rest had been converted into overflow damage. Pooh! Murong Yu's mind was directly shattered. At the same time, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, the mind wasn't the soul. Otherwise, Murong Yu would have died from the overflow damage. The myriad waves of soul were basically unable to do anything to the Dao Lord, and they were only able to offset a small portion of the attack before they were dispersed. The energy of chaos and soul suppression from the Blade of Chaos seemed to be unable to do anything to the Dao Lord as well. Conversely, the Blade of Chaos was even blasted flying by a single punch. The price Murong Yu paid for this was that both his hands had been shattered. At this moment, an emperor that carried the might of the heavens from the primeval times stepped through space and walked over with large strides. A simple punch smashed towards the Dao Lord. Bang! After a shocking explosion, the emperor seemed to have let out an unwilling roar of rage, and his tall and mighty figure was directly shattered. In the end, it was Murong Yu who wasn't strong enough. Otherwise, the emperor that he summoned would have been able to kill the Dao Lord with a single punch, and not be blasted apart after a portion of the Dao Lord's attack power was weakened. Even his strongest single attack wasn't a match for the Dao Lord. Moreover, the Dao Lord's speed was far above his own. Murong Yu knew that he couldn't escape this calamity today. However, he was absolutely not someone who would sit and wait for death. Even if he knew that he wasn't a match for the Tao Lord, he still had to fight until the end. Achilles Seal. This was a move from a 9 syllables mantra's confrontation technique. The confrontation technique was one of the most powerful defensive moves in the world. Furthermore, the immovable Bright King Seal was Murong Yu's strongest defensive move. It was many times stronger than the so-called invincible 10 directions technique. The instant Murong Yu formed the seal, a transparent shield enveloped Murong Yu's entire body like an egg. On the battlefield, practically everyone's gazes were focused here. The Divine Universe's side naturally hoped that Murong Yu would be killed with a single punch. On the other hand, the Saint Universe's side hoped that Murong Yu would be able to resist it. Especially the members of Shenzhen's side. Their hearts had risen to their throats. In the blink of an eye, the Daelord's fist had smashed onto the Achilles Seal. At this moment, the Daelord's fist was actually unable to continue forward. It had actually been blocked by the Achilles Seal. It had been blocked. The Saint Universe's side, especially the members of Shenzhen's side, cheered. On the other hand, the cultivators of the Divine Universe had expressions of disappointment and shock. Even a Tao Lord is unable to kill Murong Yu? Is Murong Yu really so heaven-defying? He's only at the true self realm now. If he breaks through to the Tao Lord realm, then wouldn't he be the strongest existence in the world? At that time, who would be a match for him? At that time, he'd probably be able to destroy a myriad of universes with a single punch, right? Rumble. In practically an instant, a wave of sounds that sounded like an eggshell shattering resounded from Murong Yu's body. Thus, to everyone's astonishment, they watched as the energy barrier created by the Achilles Seal suddenly and rapidly tore apart. In the end, everything was transformed into powder, including Murong Yu, who was within the shield. Murong Yu was unable to reverse the situation in the end and was killed by the Tao Lord. Chapter 22-29. Murong Yu had been killed? The morale of the Sacred Universe Alliance instantly plummeted when they saw this scene. Because Murong Yu's previous performance hadn't just allowed him to go head-on against 30 to 40 Tao realm experts of the Divine Universe. He'd even found an opportunity to kill the experts who'd surrounded him. It could be said that during this period of time, Murong Yu was like a god of war in the hearts of the cultivators of the Sacred Universe. Even though it had only been a short period of time, Murong Yu's prestige among them had already surpassed the sect masters of their own forces, and it was even higher than the palace master of the Wanliang Palace. Even the deacon's prestige was far inferior to Murong Yu's. After all, even though they were strong, they weren't familiar with the others. Moreover, they hadn't done much on a battlefield. So, when Murong Yu was killed, it was a huge blow to them. As for the Divine Universe Alliance's side, they cheered loudly. Murong Yu had gone up against 30 to 40 Tao realm experts by himself, and he'd been ceaselessly killing the Tao realm experts who'd surrounded him. This had caused them to feel extremely pressured. If such a person didn't die, the pressure on the Divine Universe Alliance's side would suffocate them. Father, Holy Lord, when they saw Murong Yu being killed, Murong Xian and the others roared furiously. Their eyes were bloodshot, and it was even to the extent that blood was about to seep out. Their fury burned the 9 heavens. Kill him! Murong Xian roared with grief and indignation, and he led the troops behind him to charge forward. Fourth brother, calm down. Murong Xian wished for nothing more than to kill that Tao realm expert. However, he was still relatively calm. That Tao realm expert could even kill Murong Yu, alone them. The difference between them and the Tao realm experts was too great. Not to mention that Shenzhen had only brought 1 billion cultivators. Even if there were 1 trillion times more, they still wouldn't be able to do anything to Tao realm expert. Charging forward was just courting death. Don't be rash. Perhaps the Holy Lord is still alive. Sun Yu also walked over and suppressed Murong Yi. This was to prevent Murong Yi from rushing forward impulsively and being killed for no reason. Father is not dead? Murong stared blankly. then glanced at the treasure space and found that Murong Yu's soul jade slip was still there. The soul jade slip did not shatter, which meant that Murong Yu was not dead. However, they clearly saw that Murong Yu had been blasted until not even a speck of dust remained. What was going on? Of course, the fact that Murong Yu was still alive was what they wanted to see the most. It's over. Murong Yu has been killed? The palace master of the Wanliang Palace immediately stood up with a bitter look on his face. The war had just begun, and Murong Yu had already helped him make contributions. If this went on for a long time, his status would definitely rise. But now it was such a pity. Whoosh! In the end, the palace master of the Wanliang Palace continued to rush over. Murong Yu is dead? Then I'll kill him. In this way, perhaps I'll be able to save the morale of the Sacred Universe Alliance. The Tao Lord who'd killed Murong Yu laughed coldly. He stretched out his hand with the intention of grabbing the Chaos Blade and Hichu Luoshu. These treasures were actually able to resist his attack without being damaged at all, and they were absolutely precious treasures. Then, is Murong Yu really dead? The soul jade slip did not shatter, so he's probably still alive, right? The situation had returned to the past. Murong Yu knew that he was unable to escape, so he could only form the Akala seal with the intention of resisting the Tao Lord's attack head-on. However, he was utterly unable to resist it, and it was simply like an ant trying to shake a tree. The most terrifying part was that Murong Yu's main soul wasn't within the Hichu Luoshu. In other words, his physical body and primordial soul had been blasted into smithereens and vanished without a trace. At this moment, Murong Yu was really dead. I'm going to die just like that. After Murong Yu had died, his consciousness still existed. The gap between me and a Tao Lord is still too huge. I'm truly unwilling to die just like that. If I'm able to break through to the initial Tao realm, then no one in the Tao Lord realm would be a match for me. Murong Yu roared with unwillingness in his heart. He knew that he was already dead, so he was unwilling to die just like that. All of a sudden, Murong Yu shuddered. Wasn't he dead? His body and soul had been blasted to the point nothing remains, so why hasn't his consciousness dispersed until now? This is the Phoenix's nirvana, Murong Yu suddenly exclaimed with surprise, and then he couldn't help but roar with laughter. He'd cultivated the Phoenix's nirvana to perfection a long time ago. It was a supreme bloodline ability of the Phoenix clan, and it was capable of resurrection. Theoretically speaking, the Phoenix's nirvana could be resurrected 3 times after it was cultivated to perfection. A very long time ago, Murong Yu had been killed once, and he'd used up a chance to be resurrected. Then, this was the 2nd time. Murong Yu was extremely pleasantly surprised. He'd absolutely never imagined that he'd be resurrected by a supreme skill that he'd practically forgotten, the Phoenix's nirvana. If it wasn't for today, Murong Yu would have practically forgotten about this heaven-defying cultivation technique that he'd cultivated. Because of the Phoenix's nirvana, Murong Yu still maintained his consciousness. However, he was unable to see what was going on outside. Presently, it was like he'd been sealed within an independent space, and he was unable to understand everything that was happening outside. He wouldn't be resurrected for now. Murong Yu decided not to resurrect for now, because he didn't know if that Tao Lord was still here. If that Tao Lord was still here and he was resurrected, then wouldn't he be slapped to death by that Tao Lord? So he had to wait. After Tao Lord left, perhaps the Tao Lord of the Sacred Universe Alliance would make a move after he killed me, right? If he did, then his attention wouldn't be on me. So, I can resurrect now. After a short while, Murong Yu felt that it was time to resurrect. He was able to sense that he couldn't maintain his current state for long periods of time. After all, he was within a shattered universe. It would be a tragedy if he was unable to resurrect after maintaining this state for too long. Bang! With a command in his heart, Murong Yu appeared once more within the shattered universe. Right at this moment, a strand of terrifying energy swept over. Murong Yu was shocked, and he thought that he'd been locked onto by a supreme existence at the Tao Lord realm. So, he immediately retreated explosively. At the same time, he noticed that it wasn't him who'd been locked onto. The energy that had smashed over was merely the aftershock of the energy. Not too far away from him, two Tao Lords were in battle. One was the Tao Lord of the Divine Universe who'd killed Murong and made him exhaust a chance to undergo nirvana. The other was the Palace Master of the Myriad Palace. Dongju's strength wasn't bad, and he'd completely suppressed the Tao Lord of the Divine Universe. However, Hichu Luoshu and the Chaos Blade were actually in the hands of that Tao Lord, and he was fighting Dongju. It was exactly because of the Chaos Blade that he was able to remain undefeated. Otherwise, he would have probably been killed by Dongju a long time ago. The corners of Murong Yu's mouth curled up slightly when he witnessed this scene, and he revealed a wisp of a cold smile. Hichu Luoshu, Chaos Blade, get back here. Murong Yu suddenly shouted explosively in his heart, and he was about to withdraw Hichu Luoshu and the Chaos Blade. The Tao Lord who held Hichu Luoshu and the Chaos Blade had already been killed by Murong Yu, so he hadn't been on guard at all. So, at the instant Murong Yu intended to withdraw Hichu Luoshu and the Chaos Blade, swish, swish, Hichu Luoshu and the Chaos Blade directly shot out from his hands, shattered the void, and rushed towards Murong Yu. In the end, Murong Yu stretched out his large hand and grabbed the Chaos Blade. Hichu Luoshu, on the other hand, was suspended in the void above his head again. The Tao Lord of the Divine Universe was shocked. He didn't know how Hichu Luoshu and the Chaos Blade had suddenly disappeared. All of this happened too quickly, and before he could react, the two treasures had already been withdrawn by Murong Yu. The Tao Lord Powerhouse looked in the direction where the two treasures had disappeared. Then, he saw Murong Yu. You're not dead yet. In an instant, the Tao Lord Powerhouse was horrified. It was as if he'd seen a ghost. This was because he'd previously confirmed that Murong Yu had been completely killed by him, and not even a trace of him was left behind. It wasn't just the Tao Lord who was shocked. Even the Palace Master of Limitless Palace was shocked. At this moment, everyone who was in battle below noticed Murong Yu as well. Murong Yu hadn't been killed. The Hallowed Lord hadn't perished. The Hallowed Lord was too amazing. Even Tao Lords couldn't kill him. He must have hidden himself just now, right? We actually thought that he'd perished. Damn it. He's still alive? Exactly how monstrous is he? Even Tao Lords can't kill him. When they saw Murong Yu, the morale on the side of the Divine Universe rose explosively once more. On the other hand, the Divine Universe was in a more miserable state. Their morale had fallen greatly after they'd suffered the ambush. Coupled with the fact that Murong Yu had fought 30 to 40 Tao realm experts by himself, it caused their morale to fall to rock bottom. After that, Murong Yu had been killed, and their morale had risen slightly with great difficulty. Yet now, it had fallen to rock bottom. The Divine Universe is nothing much. It's even inferior to us. Kill them. Kill these invaders. The members of the Divine Universe roared furiously. All of their strengths had risen by at least 10%, and they killed the Divine Universe army to the point they couldn't fight back at all. Of course I'm still alive. You're the one who's dead now. On the other hand, you're the first Tao Lord realm expert I've killed. Murong Yu laughed savagely. He directly erupted with a myriad of waves of soul that smashed towards the Tao Lord. The Tao Lord revealed a ferocious expression. Since you're still alive, then I'll annihilate you right now. As he roared furiously, he revealed his speed and pounced towards Murong Yu. You can't go anywhere. Dongju laughed coldly and directly kept the Tao Lord busy. He started to press down on the Tao Lord. At the same time, Murong Yu had pounced over as well. He'd launched a fierce attack from afar. The Tao Lord wasn't a match for Dongju in the first place. Now, coupled with Murong Yu's attack, it wasn't long before he was unable to hold on and was heavily injured. Murong Yu, I'll leave the final strike to you. Dongju suddenly sent a voice transmission to Murong Yu. Murong Yu didn't hesitate to take a step forward, raise his saber, and directly severed the Tao Lord's head. The Tao Lord had died. Chapter 2230. As they watched the Tao Lord's head shoot up into the sky, everyone who witnessed this scene was shocked. Murong Yu had killed the Tao Lord? and he was only at the true self realm. How could a Tao Lord be killed so easily? Even if his body was destroyed, he wouldn't die so easily, let alone his head. This thought appeared in the minds of the people of the divine universe. However, after a long time, that person still hadn't revived. At this time, there was no longer any aura on the Tao Lord's body. Finally, even though they didn't believe it, they knew that the Tao Lord was really dead. Moron Yu had even killed a Tao Lord. This was the first Tao Lord to die since the ambush began. The Tao Lord is dead. The divine universe is too terrifying. The ordinary soldiers of the divine universe started to panic. Once they panicked, their morale plummeted. The more they panicked, the more they didn't want to continue fighting here. Even the Tao Lord was dead, let alone them. Therefore, some people fled without fighting. With the first, there would naturally be a second, a third, and even more. Finally, not long after Moron Yu killed the Tao Lord, the people of the divine universe no longer had any intention to resist and started to flee in disorder. The entire army started to flee. The army was defeated like a landslide. Billions of cultivators wanted to flee for their lives, and even great Tao realm experts couldn't stop them. Moreover, the Divine Universe Alliance didn't give them the chance to do so. Chase after them, turn the world upside down, and leave no survivors. The deacon of the Divine Universe Alliance roared, his voice filled with excitement. He'd obtained a great victory in the first battle, and this had unknowingly raised his status in the Divine Universe Alliance. This time, he would gain a lot of benefits. Swoosh, 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 as the deacon of the Divine Universe Alliance roared. The great Tao realm experts on the Divine Universe Alliance's side all stood up and chased after the defeated Divine Universe. On the other hand, the ordinary soldiers also chased after them with murderous intent. On one side, their morale was high, and their killing intent was high. On the other side, their army was defeated like a landslide, and they had lost all will to fight. The difference between the Divine Universe Alliance and the Divine Universe Alliance was too great. The people at the rear fell one after another. In a few breaths, a large number of soldiers were killed. Terrifying. This defeat was the first defeat of the Divine Universe after the invasion of the Martial Tao Universe and the Saint Universe, right? The Shattered Universe was vast and boundless. In this great battle, Moron Yu and the others chased after the enemy for dozens of star field lengths before stopping. Because if they continued to chase, they would reach the headquarters of the Divine Universe Army. What they defeated was only the vanguard of the Divine Universe. Even so, the Sacred Universe's battle record was still quite terrifying. About 10 trillion invaders were killed. 1 trillion was a trillion, which meant that they had killed 1 trillion invaders this time. Blood flowed like a river, and corpses were everywhere. However, the Sacred Cosmos Alliance had suffered heavy losses as well. At least a few 100 million cultivators had perished. The number of people who were injured was uncountable. Of course, the Sacred Universe Alliance's losses were negligible compared to the billions of cultivators who had died in the Divine Universe. This was war. Even Tao Lords had perished, let alone cultivators of other realms. After cleaning up the battlefield, Moron Yu led Shenzhen to set up camp near the Infinite Palace. At this time, they were at the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's military camp in the Shattered Universe, guarding the throat passage into the Sacred Universe. If the Divine Universe wanted to invade, they would have to pass through here. Therefore, there would be more large-scale wars between the two universes in the following period of time. Either you die or I live. After leaving behind 50% of the spoils, Moron Yu brought the rest of the spoils to the Infinite Palace's main camp. This was one of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's systems. After a war, every army could clean up the battlefield. They only needed to hand over half of the spoils. After all, they all knew, the soldiers on the battlefield were fighting with their lives. If they were asked to hand over all the spoils, these soldiers would complain. Then, who would fight with their lives next time? Not only that, the Sacred Cosmos Alliance was fair in its rewards and punishments. People like Moron Yu who had made great contributions would definitely receive many rewards. Of course, The ordinary soldiers understood this too. They also needed to be paid. And where did the Sacred Cosmos Alliance's pay come from? It was none other than their original resources and these spoils of war. Moreover, the Alliance also gave a large sum of money to each soldier who had perished. Haha, Muron, you're here? Good. Let's go to the Deacon together. Muron, you had just entered the Infinite Palace's military camp when the Infinite Palace's palace master walked over with a hearty laugh. Just the two of us. Muron, you was slightly stunned. Dongju nodded. Just the two of us. The others don't have the qualifications. After pausing for a moment, Dongju continued. Muron, your performance this time was exceptional. The Deacon seems to admire you very much. I'm afraid there will be a great reward this time. Muron nodded slightly. He had indeed been in the limelight this time and had attracted a lot of attention. If the Deacon of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance didn't admire him, then he must be jealous. As they spoke, they had already arrived at the central military tent. In the tent, besides the Deacon of the Sacred Cosmos Alliance who sat in the main seat, there were many other experts sitting on both sides. These people were all captains and had similar statuses as Dongju. As for Muron, he was the only one with a similar status. Schwa. When Muron entered the central military tent, everyone, including the Deacon, looked over. Apart from the Deacon's gaze, which contained admiration, the others' gazes were filled with jealousy and fear. Obviously, they all knew what it meant for Muron to be able to step into the central military tent today. Moreover, they had all seen Muron use terrifying combat power. Which one of them wasn't jealous? Which one of them wasn't afraid? Although they were all at the Dao Lord level. If Muron increased his cultivation level by another level, wouldn't he be able to kill them easily? Greetings, Deacon. Muron cupped his fists towards the Deacon in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. All right, Muron, sit down. The Deacon smiled and gestured for Muron to sit down. Muron didn't show any signs of awkwardness as he sat down. In this battle, the Sacred Cosmos Alliance obtained a huge victory and killed 10 trillion people. I believe that this battle has already shocked the Sacred Cosmos. After the Alliance heard about this, they were also very happy. The Deacon glanced at everyone and said in a low voice, "It's all thanks to the Deacon's command. We were just following the Deacon's orders." Before the Deacon finished speaking, someone started to flatter him. Muron, you didn't care about this. Perhaps this battle was really due to the Deacon's efforts. But wasn't this person's flattery a little too obvious? Flatter. Muron, you felt some disdain in his heart. But what surprised him was that everyone else also started to flatter him, which made him rather speechless. The Deacon also showed a satisfied smile on his face. He didn't know if it was because of this battle or because everyone was flattering him well. The Sacred Cosmos Alliance is a power with a complete system. We pay attention to rewards and punishments. This time, everyone had contributed to the success of the battle. Dongju's body trembled slightly, and he stood up from his seat and stepped out. You contributed greatly to this battle's victory. Now, I specially reward you with an energy meridian and 10 Dao artifacts. An energy meridian? There was not a single person present who was not moved. What was an energy meridian? An energy meridian was similar to an immortal meridian and a godly meridian, but the energy it contained was countless times more powerful than the highest grade of energy crystal. Moreover, the energy in an energy meridian was very pure and could be directly devoured. Even to Dao Lords, it was extremely useful. However, an energy meridian was very rare. Although it couldn't be compared to a star core, it wasn't something that just anyone could obtain. Dongju's body shook violently, and he revealed a look of ecstasy. This energy meridian can allow me to break through. I can bid farewell to the predicament of being unable to break through for a long time. Dongju immediately put away these rewards with great gratitude. Muron, this time, you fought 30 to 40 Dao Realm Dao Lords alone and killed more than 10 of them. Our Sacred Cosmos Alliance was able to achieve victory because of you. First, I specially reward you with 2 energy meridians and 20 Dao artifacts. Also, I promote you to the vice-captain of the Infinite Palace team. After rewarding Dongju, the deacons started to reward Murongyu. The death of 10 trillion soldiers was actually just the tip of the iceberg to the Divine Cosmos Alliance's army. The most important thing was that the enemy Dao Realm Dao Lords had died this time. An initial Dao Realm Dao Lord was much more important than a trillion ordinary soldiers. The death of a trillion soldiers wasn't much of a loss to the Divine Cosmos. But Murongyu had killed more than 10 Dao Realm Dao Lords, so the Divine Cosmos Alliance's loss was huge. Hence, the reward this time was very normal. In fact, it was far from enough. This, Murongyu was shocked. He knew that the previous battle had attracted the attention of the big shots of the Alliance, but he didn't expect the rewards to be so terrifying. However, he deserved all these things. Hence, he accepted all of them without hesitation. Murongyu, I hope you can cooperate with Dongju more in the future and achieve more victories. The deacon encouraged him again. Murongyu immediately expressed his stance apart from them. The others also had the same experience. But no one could compare to Dongju, let alone Murongyu. In fact, apart from the energy meridians and Dao artifacts, the position of vice-captain was also quite a huge reward. It should be known that Dongju was only a small team captain. With just this battle alone, Murongyu is now on equal footing with Dongju. And if he made any more contributions in the future, it wouldn't be a problem for him to surpass Dongju. Now, I could be considered to have a large number of troops in my hands, right? Murongyu thought to himself. The Infinite Palace had 100,000 forces under its command, and the total number of soldiers was about 100 trillion. And even if Murongyu, as the vice-captain, couldn't command all of the 100 trillion soldiers, he could at least command a few tens of trillion soldiers. It could be said that he had a large number of troops in his hands. In fact, on this kind of battlefield, even 100 trillion people wouldn't be enough. The number of people and the number of peak experts ultimately determined the outcome of the battle. Chapter 22:31. Murongyu, congratulations on being appointed as the vice-captain. Your status in the Alliance is almost the same as mine. After leaving the central tent, the Wanliang Palace's palace master congratulated Murongyu in a strange tone. Murongyu glanced at Dongju indifferently. He didn't hear any congratulations from Dongju's words at all. This guy was probably very unwilling to accept his promotion, right? Moreover, if this continued, his status in the Alliance would definitely surpass Dongju's. It's all thanks to Lord Deacon's appreciation, Murongyu said indifferently. He wasn't happy about the external gains or sad about it. A glint flashed across Dongju's eyes. Then, he sneered, Murongyu, don't forget that you once swore your loyalty to me. Even if you become a deacon or even an elder in the future, you still have to be loyal to me. He was definitely suppressing Murongyu. Murongyu glanced at Dongju deeply. A cold, killing intent flashed across the depths of his eyes. From the beginning, he knew that Dongju didn't have good intentions. Therefore, he wasn't loyal to Dongju right from the start. After all, he had the heart of invincibility. Why would he be loyal to someone? At that time, he was just going through the motions. Moreover, his status in the Alliance wasn't as high as Dongju's. In terms of strength, he was even weaker. Therefore, Murongyu didn't fall out with him for the time being. I'll always remember this. After saying that, Murongyu swaggered off. If this continued, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control the intense, killing intent in his heart. Looking at Murongyu's departing figure, Dongju sneered. Then, he quickly disappeared from the central tent. After returning to Shengzhen's camp, Murongyu gathered all the great Dao realm experts and Shengzhen's upper echelons, such as Murong Xian, Zhang Ao, Duan Muqing, and the others. Holy Master, I'm afraid that there's going to be a reward from the higher-ups for your brilliant display of might this time, right? Looking at Murongyu, Zhang Ao asked with a face full of smiles. Although the others didn't say anything, they all looked happy. Murongyu smiled and waved his hand. All of a sudden, the rewards obtained in the central tent appeared in front of everyone's eyes. 20 Dao artifacts. There were also two arm-sized things that looked like rivers. The crowd did not recognize it, but they could feel the pure and enormous power from the two rivers. Is this the Alliance's reward? 20 Tao artifacts? I feel a little dizzy. Young man looked at the 20 Tao artifacts in shock and said slowly, Tao artifacts were not common goods. For example, out of the 60 great Tao realm experts that Murong Yu had subdued, less than 10 of them originally possessed Tao artifacts. One could imagine how rare Tao artifacts were. The Alliance was so generous because it stood at the peak of the sacred universe. These rewards were actually taken out from the entire sacred universe's treasury. Moreover, although 20 Tao artifacts were a lot, they were only rewarded to Murong Yu alone. The Sacred Universe Alliance did not feel any pressure at all. That's right. These rewards were given to me by the Alliance. However, I don't need these Tao artifacts. Therefore, I'll give these Tao artifacts to some of you today. Everyone's hearts tightened, and they all looked at Murong Yu with hopeful expressions. After all, who didn't want to possess a Tao artifact? With a Tao artifact, even if they couldn't unleash its full power, their strength would still skyrocket by several times or even 10 times. However, there are only 20 Tao artifacts. This means that some of you won't have a Tao artifact for the time being. However, I've promised that every one of you will have a Tao artifact. It's only a matter of time. Therefore, those who don't have a Tao artifact this time, don't be discouraged. Soon, you'll also have a Tao artifact. Everyone nodded. They could understand. Next, they could only look forward to it. After all, they didn't know if they would have a Tao artifact. The two armies are Shenzhen's strongest battle teams. In this battle, the two armies have also contributed greatly. Therefore, I've decided to reward the two armies, 8 battle teams, and Murong Xian with a Tao artifact each. Do you have any objections? These 9 people definitely deserved it. Therefore, everyone nodded. No one had any objections. Therefore, Murong Yu chose 9 Tao artifacts to reward Murong Xian, Murong's Yi, Gu Xiaoyang, Su Hegi, Yu Jia, Duan Muqing, Mulanchun, and Jia Shui. As for Zhang Ao, Yang Man, and the others, they were all elders of Shenzhen. However, they were no longer the commanders of the two armies. Therefore, they didn't have a share this time. Shenzhen suffered very few casualties this time. Apart from everyone who fought bravely, the ones who contributed the most were these great Tao realm experts. Therefore, I plan to reward the remaining 11 Tao artifacts to the 11 people who don't have Tao artifact for now, but are stronger. The stronger you are, the more you can unleash the true power of the Tao artifacts. No one had any objections. Therefore, all 20 Tao artifacts were taken. Naturally, those who got Tao artifacts were very excited. Those who didn't get Tao artifacts for now weren't depressed either. They all knew Murong Yu's character. As long as they could get Tao artifacts, Murong Yu would reward them. And now, this was just the beginning. There was still a long time to go on the battlefield. Would they be afraid of not having Tao artifacts? These two are origin meridians, which are equivalent to immortal meridians and divine meridians. They can be directly absorbed and devoured to raise one's cultivation level. These are origin meridians. Everyone present stared at the 2 origin meridians that were only the size of shoulders. Everyone's breathing quickened. Even the lowest grade of origin meridians was countless times better than the highest grade of origin crystals. They were extremely useful even to great Tao realm experts. Of course, one could directly absorb the power of origin meridians to break through one's cultivation level. However, one's cultivation level couldn't be broken through just by accumulating enough power. It required a certain level of comprehension. Without sufficient comprehension, one wouldn't be able to break through no matter how many origin meridians one had. Of course, for those who had sufficient comprehension but lacked the accumulation of power, they would be able to break through after absorbing the origin meridians. Sun Yu, which of you great Tao realm experts have sufficient comprehension but lack the accumulation of power? Murong Yu looked toward the 30 great Tao realm experts. Sun Yu and the others all shook their heads. It was really too difficult to break through to the great Tao realm. Even if it was just a small realm, it would require an extremely long time to break through. Sun Yu said, "My cultivation level has already started to loosen up. However, I still lack comprehension. I think that if I continue to stay on the battlefield, it'll be of great help to my cultivation level." That's right. I think so too. After that great battle earlier, I'm even more confident in breaking through to the next realm. The other great Dao realm experts also expressed that they had gained some benefits. After all, great battles, especially great battles, were the easiest to stimulate one's potential. Under tremendous pressure and oppression, many people would comprehend some things that they wouldn't have been able to comprehend in the past. Morong nodded. All right, since that's the case, then I'll raise the strength of Zhang Ao and the others first. As he spoke, Morong Yu waved his hand and drew Zhang Ao and over 10 others into the Hichu Luoshu. Sun Yu, these alchemical pills and origin crystals are the rewards for the battle this time around. I'll have to trouble you guys for the rest. Morong Yu handed a spatial treasure to Sun Yu. It contained a large amount of alchemical pills, origin crystals, and even origin weapons. Rewards weren't just targeted at the upper echelons. Ordinary soldiers also needed to be rewarded. Otherwise, they'd be disappointed. Sun Yu and the others quickly went to distribute the rewards, while Morong Yu entered the Hichu Luoshu. At the same time, he activated the Hichu Luoshu's time acceleration ability. Morong, Zhang Ao, and the rest were all already existences at the peak stage of Selfless Realm. They were only a step away from breaking through to initial Dao Realm. Once they broke through, they would be Shenzhen's first batch of great Dao Realm powerhouses. As for Sun Yu and the rest, strictly speaking, they were not Shenzhen's disciples. Next, I'll urge the power of the Origin Meridian and provide it to you guys endlessly. What you guys have to do now is to comprehend and raise your cultivation realm. As he spoke, Morong Yu waved his hand. Immediately, one of the Origin Meridian released a loud roar and ultimately transformed into the size of an origin star, suspending above everyone's head. Streams of high-grade and incomparably pure power emanated from the Origin Meridian, instantly drowning Morong, Xian, and the rest. Rumble. Even though Morong, Xian, and the rest did not take the initiative to devour the power, the Origin Meridian's power gushed into their bodies crazily like a flood. It was at least 100,000 times the outside world's heaven and earth origin chi. The most important thing was that the Origin Meridian's power was extremely pure. They did not need to refine the impurities contained within it all and could directly convert it into their own power. As such, they only needed to continuously absorb the Origin Meridian's power to raise their power to the limit and then break through. Everyone did not say anything. They sat down cross-legged a distance away from each other and started to cultivate. The reason why they were separated was because they did not want to affect others. As expected, this is good stuff. Even great Dao Realm powerhouses are envious of it. Seeing that everyone's power was rapidly increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye, Morong Yu revealed a smile on his face. In fact, these two Origin Meridian could also allow Morong Yu to raise his cultivation realm. However, he did not do so. He was already strong enough. Even if he were to raise his cultivation realm, it would only raise his physical body and cultivation realm. However, it was impossible for his soul realm to raise rapidly. Origin Meridian had no effect on his soul. Moreover, when Morong, Xian, and the rest became stronger, Shenzhen would become even stronger. After all, a truly powerful force was not only powerful in terms of their leader, but also in terms of the number of pinnacle powerhouses in the force. The leader had to be powerful, but the others also had to be powerful. There was still a huge gap between Shenzhen and the Infinite Palace and other forces. However, as the cultivation realm of Morong, Xian, and the rest continued to increase, Shenzhen would become increasingly powerful and gradually shrink the gap between them and the Infinite Palace. Then, they would completely surpass them. In the end, they would become the most powerful force in the world. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.